FBI detective, this video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 276, Killing Many Birds with One Stone, Luo An and the World Famous Hacker. The FBI Los Angeles Branch Building, the Special Investigation Team office area. The original broken tables, chairs, and benches have disappeared, replaced by 6 brand new desks and 6 computers. Although there is still a little dust in the corners of the office area, it has been completely renewed overall. Taking the paper handed to her by Roan, Lassie looked down with a puzzled look and found that it was a case report certificate. As far as the internal rules of the FBI are concerned, as long as the investigation team submits case reports or interrogation records, witness testimonies and other information, then the case belongs to the investigation team in terms of procedure. In other words, after Roan reported the case report and interrogation records of himself and Mona being attacked by mercenaries and their accomplices as FBI, the criminal driver is a prisoner of their special investigation team in terms of procedure. In the future, regarding the case of the driver's accomplices, their special investigation team also has the right to investigate. After all, the 3 drivers killed Roan and Mona on the orders of the captain of their accomplices. So, the number 4 investigation team did take the driver away, but Luo An and his team didn't lose anything. The follow-up investigation of the case remained in their hands. They had interrogated the driver, and the clues and confessions were all there. The 3 of them didn't need to leave anyone in the office tonight to guard the driver. Finally, Luo An also used this driver to exchange for a bunch of equipment and facilities in the office. Thinking about Luo An's operation of killing many birds with one stone, Lassie's eyes widened, and she was dumbfounded, looking at Luo An's back with an incredible look on her face. Feeling Lassie's astonishment, Luo An turned around and showed a warm smile, and then found that Lassie took several steps back, as if she had seen a flood and a beast. Luo An was a little confused. What? I didn't do anything to you? Lassie showed an awkward smile after reacting, and silently put 10 exclamation marks on Luo An's head in her heart. Although she also has some tricks, she is obviously not as good as Luo An. Lassie is now a little afraid that she will be sold out by Luo An, and she is still happily counting money for him. Luo An didn't understand the awkward smile on Lassie's face. He had no interest in lesbians. Just as he was about to say something to ask, Mona over there finally opened her laptop and said, "Of the 2 people in the sports car, I can only find the specific information of one of them." Oh. Hearing Mona's words, Luo An decisively put Lassie's matter aside, walked over quickly and asked, "Which one is it?" "It's the white young man sitting in the passenger seat." Mona tapped on the keyboard with her 10 fingers and displayed a character's identity information on the computer. Isodo Cherek Dujak, 29 years old, is one of the world's most famous hackers. He is wanted by the government in 9 countries in the world for 26 computer crimes. But he is Polish and holds a Polish passport. Polish law does not recognize these computer crimes, so he has lived a good life over the years. Seeing that the FBI's internal database specifically marked this guy in red and banned from entering the Federation, Luo An raised his eyebrows. Wow, he is a high-tech talent. It is not something that ordinary people can do to get the federal government to issue such an order. That's right. Mona said seriously that her level of computer technology might not be as good as the other party. Lassie, who was standing next to him, heard this and her eyes suddenly changed. How could such a person enter the Federation this time? And he was chased by a group of people with guns? What on earth did he do? Mona spread her hands. I don't know, but it is definitely related to computers or the internet. I just can't find out where he is at this moment. Neither the computer nor the surveillance can do it. Lassie sat down on the chair. How did such a person enter the Federation? You can call the customs of the Federation and ask them to work overtime tonight, although it is probably useless. Luo An stretched his body lazily. Although he didn't know what Esuoda was going to do in the Federation this time, he knew that the person who dared to let this guy into the Federation and bring him into the Federation must be a rich man. After all, the people in the Customs and Immigration Bureau are not vegetarians. They will only suddenly go blind when facing rich people. Lassie thought for a moment, pointed at the middle-aged white male driver with the slicked back hair, and continued to ask, "This driver has very good driving skills. What's going on with him? The guy who can drive calmly in the hail of bullets without changing his expression is definitely not an ordinary person. Sorry, I can't find anything here." Speaking of this driver, Mona frowned, saying that she had searched the FBI's internal database, the CIA's external database, and the NSA's database, but found no information. It seems that this should be a big event. Luo An crossed his arms in front of his chest, looking at the slicked back hair in the computer with his eyes slightly narrowed, and it was unknown what he was thinking. Lassie looked at Mona's computer in silence for a long time, then turned to Luo An. "Luo An, what should we do next?" Hearing this, Mona also turned her gaze to Luo An. Luo An clapped his hands and said with a smile, "Let's go back to sleep without doing anything." It was already past 9 o'clock when he and Mona went out to hunt after dinner. Later, they killed the enemy again. They returned to the investigation team and had a passionate exchange with the 4th investigation team. Now it was early morning, and it was time to go back to rest. After a simple tidying up, Luo An and Mona closed the door of the investigation team and left here to go back to sleep. Lassie drove straight to the distance on a motorcycle. She had a date that had not been completed before, and she might be able to catch the second half if she went back now. On the other side, unlike Luo An's 3 people who were relaxed and ready to rest, the office area of the 4th investigation team was brightly lit at this time. The group of guys fighting with guns were still being searched in downtown Los Angeles, and the agents of the 4th investigation team were updating the information in real time. At the same time, several agents were sitting in the interrogation room, interrogating the driver. They exchanged 4 tables, chairs, benches, and computers. After another 2 hours, several teams in downtown Los Angeles finally found the retreat route of the 2 groups, but they still did not find these people. Morton York, the leader of the 4th investigation team, looked down at his watch and his face suddenly became very ugly. At this time, the head agent came over with a document and whispered that Luo An had submitted the case report certificate before their 4th investigation team. After saying this, the head agent was very annoyed and swallowed his saliva silently, thinking that the leader Morton York would curse again. But what the head agent did not expect was that after hearing the news, the leader Morton York was silent for a few seconds, took the folder, and smiled. "It's really a little fox. Young people nowadays are either thin-skinned, inexperienced, or don't know what's going on when they are praised a few times and give up the actual interests in their hands for the sake of face. If we put aside their respective departures, Morton York, who is in his 40s, actually admires young people like Luo An Greenwood very much. But unfortunately, Luo An is the deputy leader of the special investigation team, and he is the leader of the 4th investigation team, and his position cannot be abandoned. Go order some burgers and coffee for everyone. Everyone, please work hard tonight. I'll give you a few days off afterwards." Morton York took out a few dollars from his pocket and handed them to the lead agent. He drew a picture loudly. The lead agent turned and left. The agents of the 4th investigation team continued to work with their heads down. Morton York thought that this case would be busy for a long time. But what he didn't expect was that just a few hours later, the guys who showed off their gun skills on the streets of Los Angeles appeared again and did another big thing. Chapter 277 Explosion? Bank Robbery. The next day, it was past midnight before Owen and Mona walked out of their rented apartment. In the past, when they were in the number 5 investigation team, they had to follow the morning working hours. At least they could not arrive later than Augustus. But now Roan is the deputy head of the special investigation team, and there are only 3 people in the investigation team, so Roan decisively chose to be a little partial, and he had the final say on when to go to work. Sitting in Mona's second-hand car, that cost less than $5,000, Roan thought of his Porsche. His face was slightly distorted, and he felt his heart bleeding. Taking a big bite of his breakfast, lunch, Roan, who was sitting in the co-pilot of the car, said viciously, "I must catch these guys. They must pay this money." Seeing Roan's action, as if he was biting someone while eating, Mona, who was driving, rolled her eyes. but she understood Ron's mentality at the moment, because Mona also wanted those guys to pay for her red dress. The red light came on, Mona stepped on the brakes to park the car, and Ron's cell phone in his pocket suddenly rang. "It's me, Lassie." A roar of a motorcycle came from the other end of the phone. "How long will it take you to get to the branch building? Where is the key? Don't make phone calls while riding a motorcycle. Be careful, okay?" Luo An complained casually, turned his head, and looked at Mona, who tilted her head and thought about it, and raised 3 fingers. 3 more minutes. Luo An nodded, and just as he was about to answer Lassie's question, a loud noise suddenly came from the distance. Boom. Mona's 2 raised fingers were immediately frightened, and the pedestrians on the road were even more frightened. Some of them squatted on the ground with their heads in their hands, and some screamed and ran away. The streets were suddenly in chaos, and everyone was scared to death. Explosion? Luo An, who was sitting in the passenger seat, held the food firmly in his left hand and the mobile phone firmly in his right hand, with a solemn expression. Because if he remembered correctly, there seemed to be a bank in the direction of the explosion. And it was the Federal Bank. Time goes back 2 minutes. On the streets of Los Angeles, a group of young men and women were walking leisurely on the street, chatting and shopping. Suddenly, several pure black SUVs and a modified school bus appeared on the road next to them. These cars formed a convoy and drove forward. Although the modified school bus looked a bit abrupt, this was Los Angeles, not far from Hollywood. Everyone's first reaction was that this must be a crew preparing to shoot a movie. So a group of passers-by watched the convoy move forward with great interest, and then the convoy crossed an intersection. The SUV in the front suddenly accelerated and rushed towards the Federal Bank on the side of the road. Boom. Crash. The first SUV easily smashed the glass outside the bank and broke into the bank hall. The second and third SUVs followed closely and broke into the hall from the other 2 directions. The 2 drivers in the car quickly turned the steering wheel and blocked the 2 SUVs at the original glass wall position. The modified school bus at the end of the convoy stepped on the accelerator and knocked aside several passers-by's cars parked on the road outside the bank, and then the driver blocked the car at the door of the bank. The crowd on the street saw this scene and immediately screamed and fled. The customers and employees in the bank hall immediately screamed and hid from the cars. The bank manager immediately pressed the alarm button under the table. After the second and third SUV stopped, 4 guys wearing suits, black hoods, and holding rifles quickly jumped out of the car and fired into the air. Bang, bang, bang. While shooting, they shouted at the customers and bank employees, "Back off. Back off. Put your hands above your heads. Do you hear me?" The customers and employees did not dare to resist and sat together according to the robbers' instructions. One of the robbers took out a large box from the back of the SUV and walked towards the group of people. After the first SUV broke into the bank, 3 guys wearing black hoods immediately jumped out of the car and walked towards the manager's office. They kicked the door open, and the leader raised his gun to the manager's forehead. "Give me the key. Don't make me say it again." The street where the Federal Bank is located is a wealthy street in downtown Los Angeles. There are many LAPD patrol officers. Seeing the accident at the bank in the distance, several LAPD police cars immediately drove towards the bank. The school bus driver wearing a black hood outside the bank saw this scene, sneered, took out a black backpack from behind, and threw it hard at the nearest police car. Dodge. Dodge. The LAPD and the police car acted quickly. The moment they saw the black backpack, they immediately turned the steering wheel frantically, but the black backpack that fell to the ground exploded the next second. Boom. A deafening explosion suddenly sounded, and the police car was immediately blown over and burned on the ground. The glass of the surrounding shops was instantly shattered by the shock wave generated by the explosion. Ron and Mona heard this explosion in the distance. Fouquet. Bombing. Mona put away her fingers, took a deep breath, and cursed. Just now, there was a loud noise outside the car, shaking the windows of the second-hand car, which really scared her. "No, I'm afraid it's a bank robbery." Luo An raised the mobile phone in his right hand and said quickly, "Lassie, don't go to the branch building." "I know, I heard the explosion here too. I'm not far from there." Lassie was also scared by the sudden explosion. After hearing Luo An's words, she immediately squeezed the clutch and changed to a higher gear. "I'll be at the explosion site soon." Okay. Luo An turned off his mobile phone, ate the breakfast in his left hand in a few bites, opened the car door, and ran out of Mona's car. This place is not too far from the explosion site, but there is a traffic jam ahead because of the sudden explosion, so it's better to run there. Anyway, he always runs very fast. Mona, I'll go check the situation first. Drive carefully. When Luo An opened the car door and got out of the car, he put one hand in his pocket, revealing the black pistol handle at the corner of his clothes, and there were several pistol magazines hidden at his waist. You must be careful. After Luo An closed the car door, he stepped hard on the ground and ran out in the direction of the explosion like a cheetah. The reason why Luo An wanted to go to the crime scene was simple. Such a big case would definitely attract the attention of all parties. Whether it was the senior executives of the LAPD, the senior executives of the FBI Los Angeles branch, or the senior executives of the Los Angeles government, they would definitely turn their attention here. As the deputy head of the special investigation team who had just arrived at the Los Angeles branch, this was obviously a moment to show his face in front of the senior executives and show his prestige in front of the subordinates. As the newly promoted deputy head of the special investigation team transferred from New York, he needed to shock the FBI Los Angeles branch agents with a case. Of course, this was only one of the reasons. Another important reason was that at the moment the explosion sounded, Luo An had an intuition in his heart. The group of guys in front were most likely the ones who destroyed his Porsche. Thinking of his Porsche, which he had not driven for a day, and was worth more than $100,000, Roan's eyes flashed with anger, and he ran a little faster in the shocked and astonished eyes of passers-by. On the other side, the number 4 investigation team, which had been up all night, had not wanted to get involved in this case. But after learning from the LAPD that the number of robbers in this group was exactly the same as the number of the second wave of forces that emerged last night, the team leader Morton York immediately got up and took several detectives on duty to check the situation at the scene. At the same time, inside the bank, a group of hostages were frightened and pale because there were more than a dozen bombs in the big box. Chapter 278, On-site situation and the robbers' demands. It's a bank robbery. A moment later, Luo An ran to the scene of the crime. He saw a large group of LAPD surrounding the street outside the Federal Bank, and all kinds of police vehicles of different heights and sizes were parked. On the sidewalk in the distance, more than 20 reporters from various media in Los Angeles stood. In addition to some large news groups, there were also many small entertainment newspapers. It's Hollywood after all. At this time, Luo An, wearing a suit, walked quickly into the LAPD blockade with his long legs. His posture was very outstanding. The fire burning on the police car not far away shone on his face, making him look very determined. Hello, I'm Detective Albert. At this time, several LAPDs walked out from the right, led by a middle-aged white man who looked to be in his 40s, with a chubby body and sweat on his forehead. FBI Los Angeles Branch Special Investigation Team, Deputy Team Leader Roan Greenwood. Roan took out a gold badge from his pocket and simply showed his identity, asking, "What is the specific situation at the scene?" As a detective who has worked in the Los Angeles Police Department for many years, Albert only knew about the FBI's internal investigation teams with numbers. This was the first time he had heard of the Special Investigation Team. Moreover, this was the first time Albert had encountered such a young deputy team leader. However, there was nothing unusual in what Roan showed. Detective Albert carefully glanced at Roan, turned around and took him into the scene. A group of criminals drove into the bank with the goal of robbing the bank. They had bombs in their hands and held a group of hostages. The number of hostages is currently unknown, and the number and identity of the criminals are unknown. The criminals have not yet made any demands. At the scene inside, all the LAPD dispersed, lying behind the car with guns in both hands, and pointed the guns tightly at the bank door. Everyone's face was sweating. The LAPD in the car that was blown up by the bomb just now had been rushed to rescue. No one knew whether they could survive, but they looked quite bad. In addition, a bunch of SWAT team members holding semi-automatic rifles and explosion-proof shields were at the front, and several snipers were squatting on the high platforms opposite the bank. After the explosion, the LAPD was extremely shocked and responded as quickly as possible. The speed of dispatching police was unprecedented. Although there were many people, the senior management had not arrived in a short time, and it was all up to a slightly higher ranking Detective Albert to take temporary command. The reason why Albert was still only a detective at such an old age was because his ability level was average, but he had worked for a long time and relied on seniority to get the position. This was not the first time Albert encountered a bank robbery, but he had never been in charge before. He just happened to be on duty today, and he was the highest ranking person on the scene, so he had to bite the bullet and take charge. Now the appearance of Luo An, the FBI, made Albert breathe a sigh of relief. Luo An didn't care about Albert's eyes. After listening to his introduction, he took a small telescope from an LAPD and jumped into the police car to observe the inside of the bank. He found that several guys wearing hoods were installing bombs on hostages in the lobby. The situation deeper in the bank was not visible. There were 8 robbers in total, but only 5 were in the lobby, and the remaining 3 were missing. Fouquet. Luo An cursed in a low voice when he saw this, and jumped out of the police car and turned back to ask, "Where are the bank executives? Have them rush here immediately." Although the bank that was robbed was called Federal Bank, it was not owned by the federal government, but a large bank controlled by a California consortium. "The bank executives will be here soon," Detective Albert quickly replied, and at the same time a SWAT team member came over and shouted, "The back door of the bank has been deployed. 2 SWAT teams have completely blocked that area." "Good." Luo An waved his hand and asked LAPD to bring him a loudspeaker. While waiting, he folded his hands in front of his chest and stared at the bank not far away, frowning and thinking. As far as Luo An knew, although this bank was located in Los Angeles, its main business was not ordinary Los Angeles citizens, but those big companies in Hollywood. From the start of filming to the release of a movie, it must be inseparable from a large amount of funds. In order to share the risk, the funds of Hollywood film companies often do not bear all the funds alone, but go out to find outsiders or peers to invest in it. In order to prevent their funds from disappearing in unknown circumstances, investors usually find a third party to supervise the expenditure of funds during the filming process. One of the main businesses of this federal bank is to do this. Therefore, there is not much money in the vault of this bank building, and there is not much gold. Both are far less than the Morgan Chase Bank on another street, not far from here. From the perspective of effort and gain alone, it doesn't seem to be very cost effective to make such a big show and spend so much effort to rob this bank. However, thinking of the world-class hacker that Mona found out before, Luo An narrowed his eyes slightly and had some new ideas about the bank robbery in front of him. LAPD quickly brought Luo An a loudspeaker, but before Luo An could speak, 2 people suddenly walked out of the bank opposite, a robber wearing a black hood, holding a gun against a hostage with a pale face and trembling, with a bomb tied to his body. The robber was not afraid of many guns. He took out a mobile phone from his pocket and threw it to the nearest LAPD, and then slowly returned to the bank. The phone was quickly delivered to Detective Albert, who subconsciously handed it to Roan, who waved his hand to signal the other party to answer the call. Albert's mouth twitched slightly, and he pressed the answer button. A magnetic, unhurried male voice came from the other end of the phone. "Hello, let me introduce myself. My name is Jack." "Hello, Jack." Roan, who was standing next to Albert, also heard the voice on the phone. Albert took a deep breath and said in a deep voice, "Tell me your request. I like straightforward police officers." Jack on the other end of the phone laughed and said, "Within 30 minutes, the airport will prepare a plane for us to go abroad. We will go to the airport with the hostages in a car. Let me briefly introduce that the hostages in the bank are now tied with bombs. If you do not complete my requirements within the specified time, I will blow up 1 hostage every 3 minutes." After that, without waiting for Albert to answer, Jack hung up the phone first. "Son of eating." Detective Albert cursed when he heard the busy tone on the phone. How could a small detective like him have such authority? However, behind a police car 10 steps away from him and Roan, the LAPD chief and FBI team leader Potent Burn arrived at the scene. Morton York, the leader of the 4th investigation team, also arrived here from another direction with 2 agents. Detective Albert's eyes lit up when he saw the chief coming. Ron and team leader Potent Burn looked at each other. Just as they were about to walk over with Albert, Mona and Lassie suddenly appeared together. Among them, Mona ran to Ron with a laptop and whispered, "Ron, I found something here." Ron and team leader Potent Burn exchanged glances for a second, then stopped and took the computer handed to him by Mona. At this time, clues are the most important. Detective Albert ran to the police chief and raised his phone to introduce the case to the boss. "Sir, the situation is very urgent now. The robbers' demands are." On the other side, Morton York, the leader of the 4th investigation team, frowned when he saw Luo An and the other two at the scene. He didn't expect that they arrived here earlier than him. However, he should first understand the situation at the scene. Morton York just raised his foot to go to the position of the team leader, and Luo An suddenly walked over there faster than him, holding a laptop. Chapter 279 LAPD Chief and FBI Team Leader. Mona handed Luo An a laptop computer with several surveillance videos. The video showed the scene of the group driving to the bank captured by surveillance cameras on several streets. The people in the car wore black hoods from beginning to end, so the faces of the group could not be seen clearly. However, Mona searched back along the surveillance video that appeared at the beginning of the convoy and successfully found the silver grey sports car and the scenes of the SUVs last night in a certain edge surveillance outside a villa area in the northeast of Los Angeles. Not only that, when the sports car was attacked last night, several black cars of the same model as the second wave of people also drove out of this villa area. Luo An narrowed his eyes after watching the surveillance. He was right. The robbers in the bank were the culprits who caused his Porsche to turn into a fireball. The second wave of people who appeared last night were also this group of robbers. Their purpose was to protect the leader of the robbers, who was most likely the guy named Jack. At this time, there was only one other question. That is, what happened to the group of mercenaries chasing Jack? However, Ron immediately put the matter behind him. After catching the robbers, the reason behind it would naturally come to light. "Thank you for your hard work, Mona." Ron walked quickly towards the location of the LAPD chief and the team leader Potent Burn. Mona and Lassie knew that there was no need to enter that circle, so they stayed where they were and waited for the arrival of the bank. The LAPD chief and the FBI team leader Potent Burn were the highest ranking people at the scene, so they naturally became the decision makers of this case. After listening to Detective Albert's narration, the two of them looked extremely solemn. For the top management, it was not a big problem for the robbers to have bombs in their hands, and it was a problem to have hostages in their hands, but there were ways to solve it. But the robbers in front of them not only had both, but also tied the bombs to the hostages, which was a headache. Especially at this time, there were a lot of reporters outside the scene who were watching the excitement and not minding the trouble. With the reckless nature of these guys for the sake of headlines, the LAPD chief and team leader Potent Burn were sure that there were definitely a few guys in this group of reporters who hoped that their operation would fail, the hostages would be injured or killed, and the robbers would escape from them. Seeing the chief frowning slightly, Officer Albert looked at a police chief above him and asked tentatively, "Sir, why don't we try to attack directly? If we act fast enough, we should be able to save a group of hostages before the other party reacts. They definitely can't just wait at the scene. Before the FBI people come, someone from the LAPD must make suggestions. The suggestions may be useless, but they must be made. This is an attitude." "No." The LAPD chief frowned immediately when he heard this proposal and rejected it in a solemn voice. "The image of our LAPD must be maintained, and there must not be too many casualties among the police force and the hostages. If he used human lives to pile up the victory of this bank robbery, then his job as chief would be over. Chief, we can first meet the bank robbers' conditions, and after they release the hostages, we can send elite forces to pursue them." After the chief rejected the first proposal, another LAPD superintendent next to him immediately proposed another idea. The LAPD chief did not speak. On the surface, this idea is the safest method, but doing so is equivalent to handing the initiative to the robbers. What if the robbers do not release our hostages in the end, or successfully escape from the LAPD after releasing the hostages? Then he, as the chief, may not have a good result in the end. Luo An had already walked here with the laptop and took the initiative to speak. "Sir, I found some clues related to this group of robbers." The LAPD chief was slightly stunned when he saw Luo An's face, turned his head to look at the team leader Potent Burn, and asked, "Who is this?" He had met several investigation team leaders of the FBI Los Angeles branch, but this was the first time he had met Luo An. "This is Ron Greenwood, the new deputy team leader of the Special Investigations Team of the FBI Los Angeles branch." Team leader Potent Burn answered the question of the LAPD chief and asked seriously, "Ron, what clues have you found?" Hearing Potent Burn's words, the LAPD chief's expression remained unchanged, but his eyes were a little surprised. It's rare to see such a young deputy team leader of the investigation team. I wonder if this handsome young man got to the top by strength, or by something else? Feeling Potent Burn's serious gaze, and the LAPD chief's questioning look, Ron was calm, and showed the laptop in his arms to him, narrating in an orderly manner, "This is the surveillance video of the route this gang of robbers took to this bank." Ron briefly narrated the content of the surveillance video, the street fight in Los Angeles last night, the fact that he and Mona had captured an enemy while going out, and the identity of the hacker. After finishing all this information in one breath, Luo An paused for a few seconds, and said his previous guess with a serious face, "I suspect that the target of this group of robbers is not the gold or banknotes in the bank vault, but the server in this bank." This conclusion is not Luo An's random words. He has real evidence in his hand and shows it to the two superiors while speaking, which seems very reasonable and convincing. It turns out that the big fight last night is actually related to the current bank robbery. Detective Albert, who also participated in the blockade last night, was secretly shocked. Several LAPD superintendents were even more nervous, and they were glad that the chief didn't give the order just now. From Luo An's description, the group of robbers in the bank, who can fight back and forth with the mercenaries, are obviously not ordinary people. If they really don't know anything, and just go ahead, who knows how many casualties they will cause. The LAPD chief glanced at Luo An and his expression did not change, but he nodded secretly in his heart. Luo An is so young, and has a high position. He is really good. Team leader Potent Burn noticed another problem, frowned, and asked, "What's the matter with that group of mercenaries?" "Sorry, sir, I don't know either." Ron closed the computer and shook his head, then turned his eyes to Morton York, the leader of the 4th Investigation Team, and said, "The 4th Investigation Team is responsible for the Los Angeles street fight last night. They may know what happened." Team leader Potent Burn heard this, and immediately turned to look at Morton York. "Morton York. He walked here just now, when Ron was showing the clues on the computer." He was also listening to Ron's description. While he was shocked by Ron in his heart, he found that he still underestimated him. Morton York, who had not yet found out the specific situation of the group of mercenaries, was immediately furious when he heard Ron lead the conversation to himself. After taking a look at Ron calmly and noting down the account, Morton York took a deep breath and replied, "Sorry, sir, we are still investigating." "Intensify the investigation." Potent Burn frowned but didn't say much. The most urgent task at the moment was the bank robbery, so he paused for a few seconds and asked Ron and Potent Burn together, "Do you have any suggestions or ideas about the current situation?" Morton York remained silent. The current situation was a bit complicated, and he couldn't think of any good solutions for a while. At this moment, Ron beside him raised his mouth slightly and opened the laptop again. "Sir, please look, I have another clue here." Morton York. Chapter 280 Nearly $10 billion and $8 million. Federal Bank. Luo An was about to continue explaining the clues to the officers in front of him, but he was interrupted as soon as he opened his mouth, because several bank executives arrived at the scene at this time, and Lassie brought them to the leadership circle. The leading bank executive was an elderly white man wearing a suit, slightly fat and with a big back hair. He was obviously acquainted with the LAPD chief and the team leader Potent Burn. After a brief greeting, he immediately asked about the situation at the scene. After learning from the two that the real target of the robbers was most likely the server in the bank, the elderly white man hurriedly turned his eyes to an executive behind him. Upon hearing this, the executive suddenly broke out in cold sweat on his forehead, and his lips trembled as he said, "The server is loaded with more than a dozen fund accounts of major Hollywood film and television company foundations. This group of servers in the bank is not connected to the internet, nor is it connected to the network cable to the outside, so hackers can only enter the internal network by breaking into the bank and manually connecting the network cable to the server. After all, no matter how powerful the hacker is, he cannot break into a computer without a network cable. The bank server is equipped with the highest level of firewall on the market, with encryption and protection methods. But no one knows how long these methods can resist the world-class hacker. Not only that, there are a lot of other accounts in the server that cannot be disclosed to the public, and the information of the owners behind them is relatively secret. The money in these accounts is far more than the funds in those foundations. The total amount of funds in these accounts is nearly $10 billion US. Seeing the look in the eyes of the executives, the old white man also thought of this, and his face changed immediately, and he covered his heart. The LAPD chief and the team leader Potent Burn next to him looked at each other with a solemn expression. They didn't know about the secret accounts, but they had heard about the foundations of those film and television companies. They were all large foundations with funds of over 100 million. What a big appetite. Several superintendents, Detective Albert, Morton York, Lassie and others were shocked. This was the first time they had encountered such a courageous bank robber. Luo An, who was holding a laptop, nodded secretly. The leader of this gang of robbers was indeed a smart guy. It was faster to rob money and gold than to transfer money directly from other people's accounts. Moreover, seeing the old white man who kept hitting his chest with his mouth open, Luo An suspected that there might be some other shameful things in the server. You two, please make sure to catch this gang of robbers as quickly as possible. After the old white man took out a few pills from his pocket and stuffed them into his mouth, his mental state improved a little, and then he couldn't wait to say, "Our bank is willing to donate $8 million US afterwards." Compared with the possible loss of nearly $10 billion US, $8 million US is really nothing. As for whether the $8 million US will be given to LAPD or FBI, the old white man didn't say, but everyone present knew that whoever caught the robbers would get the money. The LAPD chief and several police superintendents breathed a little faster after hearing this, and the FBI team leader Potent Burn remained calm, as if he didn't care about the $8 million US at all. Luo An was a little surprised to see this scene, and began to be a little curious about Potent Burn's previous experience. But before Luo An could think carefully, Potent Burn turned around and said in a deep voice, "Luo An, you said you found some clues before. What are they?" Luo An was speechless when he looked up and saw the gleam in the eyes of the team leader. It seems that Potent Burn does not care about the money, but he just does a better job on the surface. Ahem, it's like this. Luo An coughed twice to attract everyone's attention and explained, "Everyone, from the calm attitude of these robbers in the bank, we can see that this group of guys are definitely well prepared." No one around said anything for the time being. This is an open matter. Luo An paused for a moment and continued, "Since the other party is well prepared, it is impossible for them not to think about the countermeasures of our law enforcement officers in advance. So if we meet their requirements and allow them to drive the school bus to the airport with the hostages in 30 minutes, 25 minutes later, after arriving at the airport, no, during the escort process, we will definitely encounter emergencies." Luo An finished speaking with extremely confident eyes and judged a deduction as a definite answer in his words. Of course, Roan was sure, because he could think of no less than a dozen escape strategies by putting himself in the shoes of the bank robbers. Hearing this, the team leader Potent Burn and the LAPD chief were startled. They all had enough experience, and Roan's guess was very likely in their eyes. The LAPD chief didn't say much. A police superintendent saw that Roan from the FBI attracted so much attention and frowned slightly and subconsciously said, "We can take more precautions during the escort process, and the other party will never be able to escape from our hands. What if a crane suddenly appears in the middle of the road and lifts the other party's school bus to another road? Roan closed his notebook and calmly said 4 or 5 escape strategies, including but not limited to car accidents blocking the road, bombing tunnels, bombing bridges, and airplanes lifting school buses. After hearing these words, the LAPD, Lassie, Morton York, etc., all looked at Roan in amazement. The corners of the team leader Potent Burn's mouth twitched a few times. If Roan was not innocent and was the deputy head of the special investigation team, they would have suspected that Roan was an accomplice of the bank robbers. This is Hollywood. Roan handed the laptop to Lassie and casually said that he had dreamed of becoming a director before. Finally, he said with a serious face, "So, we can't be sure what the robbers' backup plan is. In order to prevent them from escaping from us, we must keep these guys in the bank forever." That's right. The bank executives and others beside him came to their senses and applauded Roan's words. The team leader Potent Burn also cast an approving look at Roan. But what about the bombs in the hands of this group of robbers? The LAPD chief thought about it briefly and found that Roan's analysis made sense. He didn't say anything. The superintendent next to him asked again, "These bombs are now tied to the hostages. Then find a way to defuse the bombs first, and then find a way to deal with this group of robbers." Without waiting for Roan to speak, the team leader Potent Burn glanced at the superintendent coldly and answered the other party's question. Roan's analysis was undoubtedly the best solution for the current situation. Potent Vine, who was used to doing things directly, was in no mood to argue with the LAPD about this. Potent Vine took out his cell phone from his pocket and prepared to call the anti-IED division of the FBI Los Angeles branch, asking them to come to the scene to check the situation as soon as possible. After all, this department was the expert in bomb research. "No need, sir." Just as Potent Vine was about to press the button, Roan said that when he arrived at the scene and saw the injured LAPD being rushed to the hospital for emergency treatment, he had already called the anti-IED division. Grabbing the watch on Lassie's wrist and taking a look, Roan smiled and said they should be at the scene soon. As soon as the voice fell, the black van of the anti-IED division stopped on the road behind everyone. Chapter 281 LAPD Chief, give them the plane. The anti-IED division is a major incident response team under the FBI Crime, Cyber, and Services Division. This division is at the same level as the Hostage Rescue Team, HRT, Special Weapons and Tactics Team, SWAT, and Behavioral Analysis Unit, BUN. The bank robbers not only threw bombs at the LAPD, but also tied a bunch of bombs to the hostages. Roan called this division as soon as he saw this situation. In many cases, this division will not take the initiative to attack because there are some members in the SWAT team who are responsible for bombs. So with the entry of the anti-IED division van, the LAPD chief, the superintendent, the FBI team leader Potent Burn, the 4th investigation team leader Morton York and others looked at Roan with a big change in their eyes. Roan has not given any instructions since he arrived at the scene, but everyone has now seen that Roan definitely has sufficient experience in controlling the scene and has a unique understanding of the situation on the scene. Moreover, Roan has not had any problems of exceeding his authority, and everything he does is within his scope of responsibility. After thinking this through, the LAPD chief looked at Roan with a gleam in his eyes. He was so young to become the deputy team leader of the investigation team. He was really extraordinary. Seeing that he was about the same age as his daughter, it seemed that they could get to know each other in the future. Very good. Team leader Potent Burn patted Roan on the shoulder with satisfaction, and then waved his hand, and asked the agents of the anti-improvised explosive device department to enter the scene to check the bomb. Dingling. At this moment, the black phone in Detective Albert's hand rang again, and the scene suddenly became quiet. After a few seconds of silence, the LAPD chief took the phone and pressed the answer button. "I'm the LAPD chief. Hello, Mr. Chief." The other end of the phone was still the same magnetic male voice. "There are only 23 minutes left before the time I said before. How are you preparing the plane I want? I have sent someone to the airport to prepare it." The LAPD chief lied and then said that the time required by the other party was too tight and there were some difficulties at the airport. He hoped that the other party could give more time. "That's your problem, Mr. Chief." Jack on the other end of the phone was dismissive of the chief's words. "I only give you 23 minutes. If you are not ready by the end of the time, I will blow up the hostages one by one." The chief's face turned ugly when he heard this. Just as he was about to speak, Jack on the other end of the phone suddenly asked with a smile, "Do you think these bombs are fake?" After saying that, he didn't give the chief any response at all and hung up the phone directly. Fouquet. Hearing the busy tone on the phone, the LAPD chief's face changed drastically and he shouted hurriedly, "Hostages. The other party wants to kill the hostages. Find a way to save them." The LAPD chief's words made everyone present change their faces, but there was no other way now. Team leader Potent Burn had to loudly tell everyone present to be careful of the bomb. Sure enough, a few seconds later, a hostage who was knocked unconscious was thrown out. Boom. The next second, a bright fire sounded, the bomb exploded suddenly, and the hostage who fainted on the ground disappeared directly on the spot. Reporters in the distance screamed in shock. An unlucky guy had some blood and flesh splattered on his body. The horrific scene made him vomit all over the floor. Seeing this, other reporters also vomited. The LAPD and SWAT team members hiding behind the police car hid behind obstacles a second before the hostages were thrown out, so no one was injured. In the decision-making circle, where the LAPD chief and team leader Potent Burn were located, no one was injured because they evaded in time, but everyone's face was completely black as the bottom of a pot. Damn it. Son of eating. This is a group of lunatics. They thought the other party was just seeking money, but now it seems that these guys don't care about human lives at all. The black phone rang again, and the LAPD chief pressed the answer button. Before he could speak, Jack's roar came from the other end of the phone. "I said, we want a plane. If the plane is not in place after 22 minutes, then you will watch the hostages die one by one." Snap. The other end hung up the phone again. *%. Hearing the busy tone on the phone, the LAPD chief cursed a lot of slangs with an ugly face, then took a deep breath, put the phone into the hands of the team leader Potent Burn, and said in a deep voice, "The robbers want a plane, so I will give them a plane. As for the rest, the scene is left to you." After that, the LAPD chief turned around and took the two superintendents away from here to the airport. This bunch of lunatics. Team leader Potent Burn also had a very ugly face. He took the phone and looked around and found that drone had suddenly disappeared. After a careful search, it was discovered that drone was actually with the agents of the Anti-Improvised Explosive Device Department. Before, when the chief was hung up for the first time, Roan had already pulled Lassie and quickly ran to the side of several Anti-Improvised Explosive Device agents. At that time, these agents were studying the bomb fragments that had blown up the police car. After Luo An ran to them, he immediately handed the telescope in his hand to them and said, "When the robbers activated the bomb, you should quickly check the specific situation of the bomb." After saying this, Luo An quickly said to Mona, "Take out your mobile phone to take pictures of the hostages who were thrown out. The more the better." What? The Anti-Improvised Explosive Device Department agent quickly understood what Luo An meant and quickly prepared with Mona. The moment the hostage was thrown out, Mona immediately began to take pictures crazily, and the anti-improvised agent also began to carefully observe the bomb on the hostage. After the bomb exploded, Luo An turned to look at Lassie, pointed to the reporters who were vomiting face to face in the distance, and said, "Take all the equipment that those people just took pictures with. It will be very useful." Okay. Lassie's mouth corners slightly raised and began to move quickly towards the group of reporters. After asking the SWAT team to deal with the broken bodies and debris, Luo An turned to the anti-simple department agent and asked, "How is it? Did you see clearly what kind of bomb was on the hostage?" The anti-simple department agent took a deep breath, discussed with several colleagues behind him for a moment, and replied, "It looks like a remote-controlled bomb, but it was too short just now, and it is not clear what kind of remote-controlled device it is. It's okay, I'll prepare photos for you." Luo An's expression did not change after hearing this, and he handed over the mobile phone that Mona had just used to take pictures. Lassie also borrowed their camera equipment from the group of reporters. Not long after, the SWAT team also found some remaining fragments of the bomb explosion, and then handed them to the anti-simple department agents. holding photos from several angles and fragments of 2 bombs in his hand. The anti-simple department agent cast an admiring look at Luo An, and then quickly discussed and studied with his colleagues. Team Supervisor Potent Burn and the leader of the 4th investigation team, Morton York, also moved here at this time. After learning the specific content of Roan's actions just now, Potent Burn raised his eyebrows and repeatedly praised Drone's reaction speed. Morton York stood aside in silence. Only a few minutes later, the agent of the anti-IED department turned around and said to Potent, Roan and others with a serious face, "Commanders, we know how to deal with these bombs." Chapter 282 PPT may not be true, but the slogan must ring true. The words of the anti-IED agent immediately attracted the attention of everyone present. Team leader Potent Burn asked impatiently, how to solve it? Roan, Lassie, Mona, and Morton York, the leader of the 4th investigation team, all looked at the agent with burning eyes. Thanks to the help of Deputy Team Leader Roan just now, we have figured out what the bomb used by the robbers is made of. The anti-IED agent picked up a piece of bomb fragments and explained, look, sirs, this bomb is mainly composed of TNT, a starter, and a signal receiving device. A lot of professional terms came out of the anti-IED agent, and Morton York, the leader of the 4th investigation team, frowned. Potent Burn, the experienced team leader, knew about this. Although Luo An didn't quite understand those professional terms, he understood what the other party meant. Finally, he concluded, you mean, the bomb used by the other party is actually a remote-controlled bomb, and the remote control method is likely to be a mobile phone signal, right? That's right. The anti-simple department agent nodded repeatedly. We can prevent the bomb from exploding by blocking the signal in this area. The working principle of the signal blocker is to scan from the low-end frequency of the forward channel to the high end at a certain speed. This scanning speed can form garbled interference at the receiving end, so that the end receiving the signal cannot detect the normal data sent by the remote control end. Since mobile phone bombs have frequently appeared in a certain area outside the Federation, this kind of blocker has appeared in the Federation, and the FBI naturally has this kind of professional equipment. Well done. Team leader Potent Burn patted the anti-simple department agent on the shoulder, took out his mobile phone, and prepared to make a call. I'll ask the headquarters to send someone to deliver the equipment. Potent Burn has made up his mind and will immediately launch a raid when the equipment arrives at the scene. Wait a minute, sir. At this moment, the anti-simple department agent suddenly stood up to stop Potent Burn's action and said with a serious face, just as Deputy Team Leader Luo An said just now, mobile phone remote control is only one of the possibilities. It is not ruled out that the robbers used other remote control methods. In addition, there is a manual structure on the starter of this bomb. If the robbers find that they cannot start the bomb by remote control, they still have a chance to start the bomb manually. The words of the anti-simple department agent made Potent Burn's movements stiff. He understood what the other party meant. That is, the other party was not sure whether the signal jammer could work 100%. Morton York, Lassie, and Mona frowned when they heard it. Luo An crossed his arms and thought about it, and asked, if we know what kind of remote control method the other party is using, can you make corresponding solutions? The anti-simple department agent was silent for a few seconds and nodded, but the key point now is that they don't know what kind of remote control method the other party is using. The 2 bombs that appeared in front of them had exploded. They only had some messy explosion fragments in their hands, and there was no bomb itself. The complete bomb was inside the bank hall, which was blocked by the SUV, so they couldn't study the details of the complete bomb. Fouquet. Potent Burn cursed in a low voice, but still called the FBI Los Angeles headquarters to send the signal shielding equipment as quickly as possible. Whether it would work or not was not the first thing to say. It was more important to get the equipment in place first. Potent Burn had just hung up the phone with the FBI when the black phone rang again. The other end of the phone was still full of magnetic male voice. The purpose of the other party's call was to remind the law enforcement officers outside that there were still 19 minutes left. Shit. The other party hung up the phone again, and Potent Burn's face was as black as the bottom of a pot. There was silence at the scene. Roan next to him took the bank's internal structure diagram brought by the bank executives, gestured with his fingers, and analyzed for a moment, then suddenly turned his head and said, "Sir, I have an idea." Potenbein was excited. "Say it. Please look here." Roan showed the PPT, the bank's internal structure diagram, to Potenbein and analyzed. The vault and server of this bank are placed into adjacent rooms semi-underground inside the bank. The doors are made of special concrete and special steel cladding. To enter these two rooms, there is only one way: to go around the side and rear of the bank counter. First open a locked iron door, and then follow the stairs into the interior. At this time, the hostages were trapped in the bank lobby, and several robbers were also in the bank lobby. Behind the lobby were the bank counter and manager's office. Potenbein looked at the blueprint, thought for a moment, and said, "You mean, send someone to sneak into the bank, find a way to take pictures of the specific situation of the bomb, analyze its specific remote control method, and then formulate a specific action plan?" The more Potenbein spoke, the brighter his eyes became. Judging from his skills and experience when he was young, the success rate of this plan is very high. If he could be 10 years younger, he would be confident that he could complete this task. Thinking of this, Potenbein looked at Roan with satisfaction, but unexpectedly Roan shook his head and continued, "No, sir, this is just one of them. After sneaking into the bank and taking photos of the specific situation of the bomb, we can take advantage of the situation to lead the bank robber leader Jack out of the room where the server is located. Then the people who sneak into the bank quickly kill the other party, and the people outside act synchronously, not giving the other party a chance to react, and quickly break into the bank to kill the remaining robbers. The hostage rescue team does not have enough time to arrive here, so I apply for one person to perform this task." Roan's sonorous and powerful voice echoed at the scene. After a few words, Morton York, Lassie and the bank executives not far away were shocked. Mona frowned, and Potenbein looked at Roan up and down with a serious look. This plan is too dangerous. Not to mention the bomb. In Potenbein's view, there are 8 robbers inside the bank. Once one of them is killed, the other 7 will definitely fight back quickly. Facing all kinds of looks from the crowd, Luo An's expression remained unchanged. From the outside, this plan is indeed very dangerous, but the emotional perception in Luo An's mind can allow him to find the location of others in advance, and the medicine prescribed by the system can also ensure his life safety. If he really can't beat them, Luo An can use these means to escape from the opponent with 100% certainty. What's more, Luo An didn't intend to really do this. These words were only said to the group of bank executives next to him. After all, the other party took out $8 million this time. If he didn't say it in a cold, serious and dangerous way, how could he convince these bank executives and give himself the opportunity to get the bulk of the money? The products on the PPT may not be true, but the momentum must be sufficient, and the slogans must be shouted louder. So Luo An glanced at the bank executives next to him with moved eyes, smiled slightly in his heart, and said loudly again, "Sir, I apply to carry out this mission." Chapter 283 Action begins. Sneak into the bank. Behind the police car, Roan's words shocked everyone like a bomb. Lassie and Mona frowned. Morton York had a complicated expression. Potenbein had a solemn face, and a group of bank executives looked at Roan with astonishment. No one at the scene doubted Roan's courage, but fighting was a struggle, and he had to fight against this group of well-trained and skilled robbers alone, and it was 1 against 8. Bullets don't have eyes, and as long as one stray bullet hits, Roan won't have a chance to walk out of the bank door. But this is from the perspective of others. Roan himself never does anything without confidence. Team leader Potenbein saw the expressions on the faces of the bank executives from the corner of his eye. He was silent for a long time, then nodded heavily, and said in a serious tone, "Okay, Deputy Team Leader Roan Greenwood, this task is handed over to you. Don't worry, you know me, wait for my good news." Roan turned to Mona and Lassie and winked, then said to Potenbein, "Thank you, sir, but I need some equipment." Before coming here, Roan had a Glock 18 and several magazines on him, not even a bulletproof vest. Although he was confident enough, he didn't want to be too embarrassed, not to mention that, if he didn't prepare a little more, how could he highlight the danger of the mission? "Just say it." At this time, no one on the scene refused Roan's request. No matter what equipment he wanted, Potent Burn nodded and agreed, and asked others to quickly give it to Roan. Soon, Roan put on a bulletproof vest, stuffed 2 stun grenades and 2 smoke bombs on his body, holding a Glock 18 in his hand, and 2 extended magazines on his waist. At this time, there were still 13 minutes left before the time required by the bank robbers. Mona and Lassie stood behind Roan to help him put his clothes in order. Team leader Potent Burn asked in a serious tone, "How do you plan to get into the bank?" In reality, people cannot get into the ventilation and exhaust ducts in the movie, and the front and back doors of the bank are guarded by armed robbers. It's very simple, just go from the top. Roan grinned. This little thing was not difficult for him. Since he couldn't go forward or backward, and couldn't make a hole below, he would go from the top. At this time, the FBI Los Angeles headquarters sent 3 laptop-sized jammers and a mobile phone that could take photos and transmit photos. Roan stuffed them into his bag and straddled them behind him, then nodded to Mona, Lassie, Potent Burn, and a group of bank executives, turned around and moved quickly to the side of the bank. The action plan for this operation was simple. Roan sneaked into the bank and found a way to take photos of the bomb and transmit them, and waited for the agents of the anti-improvised explosive device department to figure out the remote control method of the bomb before deciding whether to activate the jammer. As long as the jammer is activated, they can rush into the bank and kill the robbers quickly. If the jammer doesn't work, Roan will respond accordingly. The SWAT team and LAPD outside are ready to receive Roan's instructions at any time. Let's not move. Just stand at the door and wait for him to come back. Team leader Potent Burn still stood behind the vehicle. Everyone pretended that nothing had happened and waited quietly for Roan's voice to come from the communicator beside them. At the same time, Jack stood in the huge server room, pinching his watch and asked, "How long will it take? Will class hacker Exodo Cherek do?" Jack stood next to him, his 10 fingers flying wildly on the laptop keyboard. His face flushed unnaturally. Almost. Jack frowned slightly. "You'd better hurry up. We only have 5 minutes left." Okay. Hacker Exodo didn't even raise his head. A body with a gunshot wound in the forehead lay beside the 2 of them. It was the bank manager who had handed over the keys before. At this moment, the side of the Federal Bank. This street is located in a well-known wealthy area in Los Angeles. The houses on the street are not tall, and this bank is only on the 4th floor. Luo An glanced at the sniper in the distance without making a sound, and took out a bottle of physical strength potion and a bottle of feather potion from an angle where no one could see, and poured them into his stomach. Feeling that his body had become very light, Luo An's mouth corners slightly raised, strode forward a few steps, stepped hard on the ground, grabbed the top of the 1st floor window frame with both hands, and then grabbed the bottom of the 2nd floor window with both hands again. Silently pushing open the window, Luo An's figure flashed and flipped into the empty room on the 2nd floor. Luo An's series of actions of climbing the stairs stunned several snipers not far away. They were all shocked by Luo An's upper limb grip and arm strength. Several of them were SWAT members. After a simple comparison, they found that they could not do Luo An's actions just now. This deputy team leader of the special investigation team is really not an ordinary person. I don't know how he trained. The 2nd to 4th floors of the Federal Bank are VIP customer areas, office areas, storage service areas, etc. The robbers' activities were limited to the lobby on the 1st floor, the semi-underground vault and the front and back doors. Therefore, no one noticed Luo An entering the room on the 2nd floor. The bank's internal surveillance had been destroyed by the robbers. Their original intention was to prevent the LAPD or FBI from observing the situation inside the bank through the camera, but the destroyed surveillance also made it convenient for Luo An to sneak into the bank. Walking silently in the corridor on the 2nd floor of the bank, Luo An crossed the elevator to the stairs and slowly moved to the 1st floor along the stairs. The stairs are located deep in the lobby on the 1st floor, diagonally behind the bank counter, and there is still a distance from the hostages, but the bank counter is just opposite. More than a dozen hostages with bombs tied to their bodies sat together in the lobby. The direction of the bank counter could not take pictures of the bombs. The only place where the bombs could be photographed was in the manager's office on the other side. There were a total of 8 robbers in the bank. 2 guarding the back door of the bank and 2 guarding the front door of the bank. The 2 missing people should be Jack and the hacker. They are probably in the server room at this time, so there are only 2 robbers guarding the hostages in the hall. Because the hostages are all tied with bombs and tied together, the 2 robbers are quite relaxed at this time. They are happily chatting, while using guns to look at people. After this operation is over, I will marry my girlfriend. Great idea. By the way, I heard that your girlfriend is pregnant? That's right. What does your girlfriend's husband think? He is very unhappy, and is divorcing my girlfriend, so I plan to have a good talk with him after this is over. Luo An, who was hiding in the dark, rolled his eyes. He was worried that his operation would fail before, but now that he heard the robbers flagging him, Luo An immediately felt that this was stable. He took off the package on his body and hid it. Luo An moved to the manager's office like a ghost in the shadows, where the hostages could not see. He took out his mobile phone from his pocket, took more than a dozen photos of the bomb on the hostage across the street, and transmitted them to the outside. After the photo-taking operation was over, Luo An returned to the staircase from behind the manager's office. Outside the bank, several agents from the anti-IED department received the photos and immediately checked the details of the bomb. At the same time, inside the bank, a familiar magnetic male voice suddenly came from far away with footsteps. Number 9, number 6, the operation will end soon. Remember to follow the plan. Okay. The 2 people in the hall nodded repeatedly, but the familiar male voice did not seem to stop, but got closer and closer to the staircase where Luo An was. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 284. The plan was successful, but not completely successful. Inside the bank, the magnetic male voice walked towards the bank hall step by step, getting closer and closer to the staircase. Time passed second by second, and it was gone in the blink of an eye. The magnetic male voice quickly walked to the staircase, subconsciously turned his head to look around and found nothing, and continued to walk towards the bank hall. On the side of the staircase on the second floor, where the magnetic male voice could not see, Luo An stood against the wall with a backpack equipped with a shield. When he heard the other party coming here just now, Luo An took advantage of the fact that the effect of the feather falling potion had not yet ended, stepped hard on the ground, and jumped onto the stair railing, and then jumped into the second floor from the railing. The next second after Luo An hid at the side of the staircase, the magnetic male voice walked over from the staircase on the first floor. After exhaling a little, Luo An took out his mobile phone from his pocket and sent a message to ask about the research progress of the anti-improvised explosive device department agent. As a result, the team leader Potent Burn replied, "Still working hard." Luo An shook his head speechlessly, and now there were less than 10 minutes left before the other party's request. And just now the man downstairs said that the operation would be over soon. Who knows how much time the anti-IED agents will need. He typed on the keyboard of his mobile phone and sent a text message saying, "When you hear gunshots, break into the bank and start the operation." Roan put away his mobile phone, hid the signal jammer, checked the bullets in the Glock 18, and raised his lips slightly. "Next, it's my turn to take the lead." Outside the bank, the team leader Potent Burn's pupils shrank when he saw the text message sent by Roan. He didn't like this kind of sudden accident when things were out of his control. But seeing that the anti-IED agents on the side had not really discussed a result, Potent Burn had to take a deep breath, waved his hand, and called Lassie and Mona, asking them to notify all the SWAT team members and LAPD police present. When gunshots are heard in the bank, break into the bank immediately to rescue the hostages. Inside the bank, at this time, the magnetic male voice was still in the bank lobby, whispering something to the bank robbers codenamed number 6 and number 9. "It's going well inside. As long as the follow-up plan goes smoothly, the money." Okay. Luo An, who was as silent as a ghost, saw this scene and silently analyzed the next plan. The top priority now is to find out what the remote control end of the remote controlled bomb is, and where it is. Luo An did not see any items in the magnetic male voice's hand, but only found that the other party's chest pocket was bulging, containing a square box with an antenna, suspected to be a remote control device. But it cannot be ruled out that it is a mobile phone. Luo An pondered for a moment and decided to make a feint to the east and attack in the west, make a little noise upstairs to attract the attention of the 3 people in the lobby, let the 3 people go upstairs separately to check the situation, and check the reaction of the magnetic male voice. If the object on the other party's chest is really a remote control device for a remote controlled bomb, then when he finds a sudden problem, the other party will definitely hold the remote controlled device in his hand. Moreover, when number 6 and number 9 went to check the situation, the magnetic male voice would not directly detonate the bomb to kill the hostages. At most, he would call the law enforcement officers outside to warn them not to play tricks. On the other hand, as long as he could figure out what the other party's remote control device was, Luo An would be absolutely sure to kill the other party directly. After the plan was made, Luo An immediately turned back to the second floor of the bank. On a table in one of the reception rooms, he simply set up a small device that could delay the cup from falling to the ground, and then moved from the shadows to the manager's office again. Time passed by second by second. The magnetic male voice whispered to the 2 robbers in the hall and finished discussing. Just as he was about to turn around and leave, a crisp sound suddenly came from the second floor. Pala. The sudden sound scared everyone in the hall, and all the hostages trembled in fear. The 2 robbers number 6 and number 9 subconsciously raised their rifles and pointed them at the stairs on the second floor. The magnetic male voice immediately took out a pistol from his waist, and at the same time, he took out a square box with an antenna from his chest pocket with his other hand. Luo An, who was hiding in the dark, raised his eyebrows slightly when he saw this. As he expected, the enemy's first reaction to the sudden situation was to take out the remote control of the remote-controlled bomb. Number 6. Go check the situation. Number 4. Come back. What Luo An didn't expect was that the magnetic male voice not only instructed one of the robbers in the hall to go to the second floor to check the situation, but also asked one of the 2 robbers guarding the front door of the bank, codenamed number 4, to return to the bank hall. The magnetic male voice took the remote control device, put away the pistol, took out his mobile phone to call the law enforcement department outside, and walked quickly towards the vault and server location deep in the bank. Luo An frowned when he saw this. Number 6, who went to the second floor to check, was not fast. On the contrary, the magnetic male voice walked very fast. It was expected that Luo An would completely lose sight of the other party in a few seconds. In order to prevent the remote control device from getting out of his sight, Luo An had to kill the magnetic male voice now. But there were 3 robbers with rifles in the bank hall, and the robbers guarding the front door of the bank also noticed the situation on the scene. So Luo An not only needed to kill the magnetic male voice in a very short time, but also had to deal with 4 bank robbers with rifles at the same time. The plan was successful, but not completely successful. Shit. Now was not the time to hesitate. Luo An opened the system page, took out a bottle of hemostatic agent and a bottle of swift agent, poured them into his stomach, then opened the safety of the Glock 18, and quickly stood up in the manager's office. Huh? Who is it? A handsome man with a gun suddenly appeared in the manager's office, which was already empty, and everyone was shocked again. The hostages with bombs tied to their bodies all scared, wondering when Luo An appeared here. The 3 armed robbers in the hall also shrank their pupils, but their combat reactions over the years made them raise their guns and shoot at him the next second after Luo An appeared. Bang, 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 bang. But Luo An was faster. He pulled the trigger, and a bullet rushed out of the chamber, instantly piercing the forehead of the magnetic male voice not far away. The magnetic male voice subconsciously turned back to check when he heard something behind him, but as soon as he turned his head and had not seen Luo An's face clearly, a bullet made his body limp and fall into a pool of blood. Luo An, who was absolutely confident in his shooting skills, did not even look at the magnetic male voice after firing the first shot. Instead, he rushed out without stopping, rolled over on the spot, and squatted steadily beside the bank clerk counter diagonally opposite the manager's office. The next second after Luo An left the manager's office, the bullets of the 3 robbers in the hall smashed the desks and glass inside into pieces. Shit. What's wrong with this guy? The remote control is over there. Kill this guy. The 3 robbers were furious when they saw the body of the magnetic male voice. Although they were surprised that Luo An's speed actually dodged their bullets, they were 3 people after all, and Luo An was only 1 person. With more people against fewer people, they were sure to win. In addition, the body of the magnetic male voice was right behind Luo An, and the remote controlled device also fell to the ground. In order to prevent the group of law enforcement officers outside, they had to snatch the remote controlled device back. Bang, bang, bang. Rapid gunshots suddenly rang out in the bank hall, and bullets shot in the direction of Luo An. The 3 robbers walked towards this side quickly while shooting. At the same time, when the gunshots were heard in the bank, the team leader Potent Burn immediately shouted, "Action!" Chapter 285. The operation is over, and those who planted the flag did not have a good ending. Following the order from the team leader Potent Burn, the SWAT team members and LAPD who had been waiting at the front and back doors of the bank for a long time immediately stood up and rushed to the bank. Several SWAT snipers who had been lying on the commanding heights for most of the day also pulled the trigger at the same time. Bang, bang, bang. 3 gunshots. The only robber left at the front door of the bank and the 2 robbers at the back door immediately fell to the ground with blood splattered on their heads. The police outside are taking action. Hurry up and get the remote control. Kill this guy. At the same time, the faces of the 3 robbers in the bank lobby changed drastically. 2 of them continued to shoot crazily at Luo An's position, and the other ran towards the ground remote controlled device even faster. Ding. Gilulu. At this moment, the 3 suddenly saw a round object in front of them. Robber number 4, who was running in the front, was so angry that his eyes were red and he shouted, "Shock." Boom. Before he finished speaking, a deafening explosion suddenly exploded, and the extremely dazzling white light made the ears and eyes of robber number 4 bleed instantly. Bang. The next second, a bullet shot out from the Glock 18, successfully entered the forehead of robber number 4, and sent him to hell. After solving 1, there were still 2 left. Luo An, who had already opened the emotional perception in his mind, pulled the trigger, changed the muzzle, and shot at the other 2 figures in an instant. Bang, bang. After 2 short and powerful gunshots, one of them fell on his back. Luo An was about to shoot the second person, but a sharp wind blew quickly towards his ears. Bang. Seeing the ferocious face of number 6 and the cold light of the dagger in his hand, Luo An took a step back, lowered his head, dodged, and immediately straightened his back, and prepared to pull the trigger. Swish. In order to avoid you coming towards his neck, Luo An deflected his body and the muzzle of the gun was deviated, hitting the steel wall of the vault not far away. Wow. Number 6 attacked again with a dagger. Luo An simply turned the pistol in his palm and put it back into his waist. With red eyes, he whispered, "Playing with a dagger in front of me? How dare you?" Luo An decisively changed his gun to a fist. His muscles were flexible to avoid the opponent's dagger. His legs dodged and took a side bow horse stance, punching in the middle. With the blessing of physical fitness, the fist wind became extremely pleasant, like an arrow shot from a startled string, shooting directly at the empty space in number 6's abdomen. There is a saying in the Eastern martial arts world that a sound is worth 1,000 gold, which means that the sound of Kung Fu is a manifestation of profound martial arts. Luo An knows how to kill people. Because of the system, his physical fitness is already very high at this time, and the sound is not too difficult for him. Number 6 heard the sound and showed horror on his face. He bent down instantly, and the dagger cut towards Luo An's wrist again. Boom. A punch hit number 6's empty space, a pleasant sound of a startled string, and a huge force burst out instantly. Number 6's body retreated uncontrollably until his back hit the steel wall of the bank counter. A mouthful of blood spurted out of his mouth uncontrollably, and his face was full of shock. Who is this guy? Seeing the dumbfounded look on number 6's face, but still forcing himself to endure the pain and continue to pounce on the remote control device not far away, Luo An was too lazy to continue to compete with him in martial arts, and directly took out a pistol from his back. Bang. The bullet shot out from the barrel of the gun, and a blood hole suddenly appeared on the back of number 6's head. His legs softened, and he fell forward to the ground. His right hand reached forward to grab the remote control device. Number 6 looked at the remote control device less than 10 centimeters away from his right hand with bloodshot eyes. A stream of blood flowed from his forehead along his eyes to the corners of his mouth and finally flowed to the ground. He stared and lost his breath. Those who put flags on themselves will not have a good end. Luo An put away the Glock 18, picked up the remote control device from the ground, and shook his head repeatedly as he looked at the dead number 6. It was this number 6 who planned to go back and chat with his girlfriend's husband after robbing the bank this time. Now it seems that there is no way to talk. After handing the remote control of the bomb to the SWAT team not far away, Luo An continued to walk to the location of the vault deep in the bank with a pistol. There were 8 robbers in total. SWAT killed 3 gatekeepers, and Luo An killed 4 himself. There is 1 left. If nothing unexpected happens, the remaining guy should be the hacker. After taking the remote control of the bomb, the SWAT team members and LAPD who broke into the bank were all shocked when they saw the 4 bodies on the ground. Except for the robber leader with a pistol, the remaining 3 were all tough guys with rifles. In the previous street battle in Los Angeles, they were able to kill the hostile mercenaries, which was enough to show that this group of people were extraordinary. But they didn't expect that Luo An, who was just holding a pistol, killed 3 of the opponents. Several SWAT agents looked at each other. They heard that Luo An was the deputy head of the special investigation team. And the special investigation team seemed to have just been established in the FBI Los Angeles branch, and it was said that it was very short of people now. Mona frowned at the bodies on the ground, holding a laptop, and quickly followed Luo An's figure. Although Luo An explained to her beforehand that he was confident, how could she not worry about him? She must talk to Luo An after the operation. They are both deputy team leaders, so there is no need to rush to the front in everything. Lassie looked at Luo An's back and swallowed silently. She found that Luo An's skills were getting more and more terrifying. She really wanted to know how he practiced. She didn't see him practicing fighting often on weekdays. If she had a chance to ask Luo An for advice, Lassie didn't think she could beat Luo An, but after learning his skills, Lassie felt that she might have the physical strength and skills to fight 3 against 3, or even 5 against 1. Morton York, the leader of the 4th investigation team, was silent. Not to mention Luo An's ability to solve cases, just based on the skills Luo An showed, the position of deputy team leader of the special investigation team was more than enough for him. It was a pity that the 2 had different identities, otherwise he really wanted to recruit Luo An under his command. None of the young people in the 4th investigation team could compare to Luo An. Team leader Potent Burn looked at Roan's back with his eyes shining. He never thought that Roan could do this. Thinking back to when he was this age, Potent Burn found that his skills were far inferior to Roan's. He's a good seedling. Potent Burn stepped forward and quickly followed Roan's back into the depths of the bank. He planned to have a good chat with Roan after this matter was completely over. Potent Burn knew that the big man behind Roan was Verines, and he also knew who was behind Verines. But in his opinion, overseas was the most suitable place for Roan to develop. Places like Washington would only bury Roan's skills. On the other side, Roan walked slowly towards the room where the server was located with a pistol in hand. Seeing Mona and Potent Burn following not far away, Roan nodded to the 2 and then rushed into the room with a Glock 18 in hand. FBI. No one in the room answered, except for the bank manager who had been dead for a long time on the ground. A white young man was lying on the ground silently, and next to him was a pile of computers that were burned to pieces by fire. Roan slowly walked over and pulled the body apart and found that the other party was indeed the hacker Isodo, but at this time he had lost his breath and blood was flowing out of his ears, mouth, and nostrils. His eyes were red and his face was distorted. So cold-blooded. Although he didn't know the specific cause of this guy's death, Roan was sure that the person who did it was 100% that Jack. Putting away the Glock 18, Roan saw from the corner of his eye that there was a small piece of something stuck to the sole of this guy's shoe. Just as he picked it up, Potent Burn and Mona walked into the room. How is it? Obviously, I was silenced before I got here. A gleam flashed in Luo An's eyes, and he quietly put away the small thing and replied, "It will probably take a long time to figure out the bank's losses. That's a problem on the bank's side." Potent Burn glanced at the body on the ground, and the two had a brief discussion, and then handed the scene over to the subsequent trace examination detectives. In the distance, at the airport, the LAPD chief's cell phone suddenly rang. Chapter 286. Luo An was confessed his love from a distance. In the direction of the airport, the LAPD chief pressed the answer button, and the other side was a police superintendent under his command. The police superintendent seemed to be indifferent to the several ways of escaping the LAPD pursuit described by Luo An earlier. In fact, after leaving the bank with the chief, they immediately sent people to search several routes from the bank to the airport. After careful investigation, several patrolmen really found a pile of explosives under a certain viaduct, and the amount of explosives was enough to blow up the bridge. Very good. Very good. The LAPD chief praised the superintendent repeatedly, with a smile on his old face, and said, "The time required by the robbers is coming soon, right? Let them drive to the airport. We can catch them all on the road, or at the airport." Hearing the words of his own chief, the superintendent on the other end of the phone looked a little embarrassed. After a pause of a few seconds, he said that the robbers had been dealt with by the FBI. The particularly young deputy chief of the special investigation team went deep into the bank alone, and with the help of the inside and outside, he killed 4 robbers in one fell swoop. The smile on the face of the LAPD chief froze, and he slowly fell silent. The superintendent on the other end hesitated for a few seconds, and just as he was about to speak, the LAPD chief said again, "Then you should contact the media immediately and hold a press conference now. We are better at this than the FBI. It was the FBI who shot and killed the robbers, but their LAPD had been controlling the scene from beginning to end, and also found the explosives prepared by the robbers in advance. They still have some credit, so now they must blow it up. The size of the work is not important, it must be known and seen by people. After all, he is an old hand who has worked as the LAPD chief for many years." In just a moment, he thought about his speech at the press conference. There is also the deputy team leader Owen Greenwood of the special investigation team. The LAPD chief found that this is a very good talent and can get in touch with him more in the future. The federal bank robbery happened suddenly and ended quickly. When Roan took the lead and walked out of the bank door, the case was successfully declared over. Standing in front of the bank, Roan looked up at the SWAT team members inside the police line. The rescued hostages had sweat and dust on their faces, which seemed like the lights of a stage play, making Roan's handsome face even more dazzling. The reporters not far away seemed to be crazy, pressing the shutter frantically to shoot this scene, and there were also a few angry curses such as "Where is my camera?" Lassie, who was standing behind Roan, glanced to that side calmly, with her head raised and chest puffed out, her expression unchanged. She knew nothing. That afternoon, the whole process of the bank robbery was published in newspapers, news and magazines. After all, this is Hollywood, and a minute's delay in publishing news is a disrespect for the speed of reporters here. This bank robbery was successfully solved at a very fast speed with the sincere cooperation of the FBI and LAPD. Because of the special request of Roan and the team leader Potent Burn, there was no photo of Roan in the newspaper, only Deputy Team Leader Owen Greenwood of the FBI Special Investigation Team, a series of reports on on-the-spot command. The report also used a lot of space to describe the 8 robbers. Deputy Team Leader Owen Greenwood entered the bank alone and killed 4 of them by himself. I don't know if the reporter who wrote this report had written scripts for movies before. In his writing, Roan seemed to have become a superhero in the movie, a lone hero, fearless, brave, and resourceful. The culture of the Federation has always worshipped heroes who successfully saved the world alone. As soon as this report came out, the name Roan Greenwood immediately resounded throughout Los Angeles, and the sales of newspapers exploded. There were many people who were dismissive, saying that these reporters were exaggerating and could not be believed at all. But the hostages in the bank, who saw the whole fight between Roan and the robbers, came forward one after another, saying that the reporters did not lie, and even what they wrote was far worse than the real Roan. Roan's handsome face was no less handsome than those movie stars, and several female hostages even began to court him from a distance. Because of the words of the female hostages, the name Roan Greenwood became more and more popular. The hot momentum completely suppressed the press conference of the LAPD chief. No one cared that the LAPD had discovered the robbers' backup plan, and no one even scolded them. LAPD chief. As for the interior of the FBI Los Angeles branch building, although Roan's photo was not published in the newspaper, as the SWAT team members who participated in the on-site operation spread the word, everyone in the building knew that the young and handsome deputy team leader was Roan. So when Roan took Mona and Lassie back to the headquarters, when he parked the car and walked into the building from the parking lot, all the agents on the road looked at Roan with different eyes. Some were afraid, some admired, some were afraid, and some were curious. But no matter what they thought in their hearts, when Roan walked in front of them, all kinds of emotions immediately turned into respect. "Good afternoon, sir. Sir, good afternoon." One by one, the agents greeted him. Luo An nodded. "Good afternoon." He took the elevator back to the office area of the special investigation team without stopping. Luo An pulled a chair and sat down, stretching his body vigorously. "No one will look down on our special investigation team now." Mona and Lassie followed closely behind. Lassie poured herself a cup of coffee and said with a smile, "But Luo An, you have become so famous this time. I'm afraid you will encounter some troubles in solving cases in the future. Please call me deputy team leader." "Thank you." Luo An replied casually and then moved his chair to Mona. Mona didn't talk to Luo An much during the whole journey, and it was obvious that she was angry because she was worried about his safety during this operation. He put his arm around Mona's slender waist, suppressed her unhappy struggle, and threw a few sweet words at her, and Mona's unhappiness immediately dissipated by 70%. Lassie. Seeing the couple openly flirting in front of her, Lassie rolled her eyes, took out her mobile phone, and started to send messages to the landlord who lent her the motorcycle. Last night she learned something new from someone else, and Lassie wanted to show it to the landlord tonight. Lassie quickly stared at her phone, immersed in her own world with a smile on her face. Mona next to her broke free from Luo An's arms, and said in a serious voice, "Luo An, this operation is really too dangerous." Luo An was about to explain, but Mona continued, "I know you want to say that you are sure, but bullets don't have eyes. How can you guarantee that you won't get hurt every time?" "Don't worry, Mona, it won't happen again in the future." Luo An blinked. He would not tell anyone about the system in his mind except himself, so he comforted Mona. "After this matter is over, our special investigation team will definitely recruit people. Later we can recruit a few guys with good skills and high marksmanship. At that time, I will be at home like Augustus, and I won't have to do it myself." Mona nodded silently, and then kissed Luo An's mouth. Luo An hugged Mona for a few seconds in silence, and suddenly remembered the little thing he found under the feet of the hacker's body before. Just as he was about to ask Mona, there was a knock on the door of the special investigation team's office. Mona immediately separated from Roan, and Lassie also raised her head. Roan picked up the coffee and said loudly, "Come in." The person who came pushed open the door with a serious face. It was the team leader Potent Burn. Chapter 287, How to Distribute the Bank's Losses and the $8 million. Pushing open the door, Potent Burn smiled softly when he saw the new desks and chairs in the office area, as well as the computers on the desks. He had just learned that the leader of the number 4 investigation team, Mortimer York, brought his agents here to rob people last night, but several of his agents were defeated by Roan alone. In Potent Burn's view, it was very normal for Roan to kill 4 robbers alone and easily defeat the ordinary agents of the number 4 investigation team, and he even held back. Later, Roan exchanged a lot of things for the driver, which made Potent Burn look at Roan with a new eye and more satisfied. This means that Roan is not only good at fighting, but also has brains, and also understands office politics or higher level politics. After all, one of the essences of federal politics is the exchange of interests. "Hello, sir." Seeing that the visitor was Potent Burn, Roan and the other 2 immediately stood up. "No need to do that, sit down, I'm here to see Roan." Potent Burn waved his hand, signaling Mona and Lassie to sit down as before. Roan nodded when he learned the other party's purpose, and took him into the team leader's office next door. At this time, the office was extremely clean, with nothing but air, so Roan took 2 chairs from the office area outside. Roan poured another cup of coffee for Potent Burn and said with a smile, "After all, I just came to Los Angeles and the office has not been cleaned up yet." Potent Burn took the coffee and raised his eyebrows slightly. "Really? Then where did the tables, chairs, and computers outside come from?" Roan smiled and replied, "A kind-hearted person gave them to me." Potent Burn smiled and said nothing. Morton New York, the leader of the number 4 investigation team, is not a kind guy. After taking a sip of coffee, Potent Burn stopped talking nonsense about this matter and began to shift the topic to business. The losses of the federal bank have been calculated, and the apparent loss is $1 billion. Although it is said to be $1 billion, Potent Burn has found through various connections that the funding projects of the foundations of several well-known film companies have not suffered losses, so it is impossible to determine how the $1 billion is calculated and whether it is true or false. Roan's eyes moved slightly, and he noticed the keywords in Potent Burn's words. "Apparently?" Potent Burn nodded, and then threw Roan an indescribable look. The previous operation was over, and the hacker's body had not been pulled out of the room by the trace examination department detectives, and a group of bank executives rushed in with several technicians holding computers. The computer was turned on, and the server was connected. After a complex system operation, a technician whispered something in the ear of one of the bank executives, and a lot of cold sweat instantly broke out on the forehead of the bank executive, and the elderly white man also took several deep breaths in a row. Seeing the other party's appearance, Potent Burn didn't believe that their loss was only $1 billion, but the bank's senior executives refused to allow FBI agents to intervene in the server, so he didn't know how much they had lost. Potent Burn didn't bother to know. Anyway, the bank robbers had been dealt with, and the FBI had done what they should do. He was not interested in the dirty things in the bank. The eyes should be interested. Luo An was not interested in this either, but he thought of another thing. "Sir, did the bank say what the chances of getting the money back were?" "I don't know." Potent Burn didn't know about these things. However, an agent specializing in computers in the trace examination department explained to him later that if the hacker's computer was still there and the USB flash drive was still there, they might be able to reversely calculate through the computer worm specially made by the hacker to break through the bank's server protection wall and thus find the program set by the other party to transfer money. Although the bank can find the account where the money was transferred, there must be a lot of those accounts. Those money were definitely not transferred just once. It was normal for each sum of money to be transferred hundreds or even thousands of times, so it was impossible to find out the final destination of the money. The only hopeful computer and USB flash drive were also burned to pieces by the fire. The agent of the trace inspection department said that the chips of the two had been burned to carbon and could not be technically restored at all. Luo An swallowed the coffee and concluded, "The hacker is dead, the robber leader Jack is dead, the computer USB flash drive is scrapped, and the bank is very likely to be unable to recover the money they robbed." "That's right." Potent Burn patted Luo An on the shoulder, saying that the whereabouts of the money had nothing to do with their FBI. The performance of the bank executives showed that the money they lost was probably not clean. If they really wanted to investigate, it would be the turn of the eyes. After drinking the coffee in one gulp, Potent Burn looked at Luo An and said seriously, "Forget the follow-up of this case. Luo An, your performance today was very good, far exceeding my expectations. Well done. It's all due to the good command of the superior." Luo An replied with a smile. The two looked at each other and smiled knowingly. After a brief chat, Luo An asked, "Sir, when will the thank you money promised by the bank arrive?" "I'm afraid it will take some time. $8 million is not a small amount of money. It is impossible for the guys who want to read the bank and write Pixio to take out the money very quickly. However, default is even more impossible. This is the $8 million promised before. LAPD and FBI are not kind organizations that are easy to talk to. How to distribute this money? The FBI must take the biggest share, so the LAPD will probably only get $1.3 million. The SWAT team will get $800,000, and the remaining $5.9 million will belong to the FBI alone. The $5.9 million will be divided among several other departments involved in this case, and the team leader Potent Burn the director of the FBI Los Angeles branch, the deputy director, the special agent director, and the FBI Financial Facilities Department will take part of it. The remaining $3 million will belong to the Special Investigation Team where Luo An is. On the surface, the Special Investigation Team only received $3 million of the $8 million in thank you money, but in fact, the director, deputy director, special agent supervisor, etc. all received a sum of money, which means that Luo An has directly entered the sight of the top management. If the top management is satisfied, the subsequent work and life will definitely be smoother. After the Finance and Facilities Department received the money, according to the past, it would take out a part to improve the office conditions of each department. Luo An's Special Investigation Team will definitely receive some small care within this scope, so another sum of money will be returned. Other departments in the building that are not familiar with Luo An will definitely be much more friendly to Luo An afterwards. After all, the funds they received were obtained by Luo An, so Luo An will definitely be much more relaxed when handling cases in the future. By the way, your special investigation team is still short of some members, right? When Potent Burn was about to leave the special investigation team, he suddenly thought of something and took out a piece of paper from his pocket and handed it to Luo An. This is the document I asked the director to sign. Luo An took the document, which contained a notice that the special investigation team could choose its own team members from any department or any team of the FBI Los Angeles branch. Wow, thank you, sir. Such a great power made Luo An's mouth slightly raised. The money was not taken for free, and the door of convenience was here. You're welcome. Potent Burn waved his hand, indicating that this was what Luo An deserved. After a few seconds of hesitation, he asked, by the way, Luo An, are you interested in overseas? Luo An? Chapter 288 Mona. Luo An, no. This is the office. Special Investigation Team office. Team Leader's office. Seeing the question on Roan's face, Potent Burn began to explain patiently, and Roan knew that he was a CIA agent who had been active overseas for many years when he was young. Hearing that Potent Burn had taken a fancy to his skills and wisdom and wanted to recommend him to go overseas to show his skills, Roan immediately shook his head and rejected the other party's suggestion. The Federation is a country with clear class divisions. It is very unfriendly to the poor, but very good to the rich. It happened that Roan had accumulated a small asset of several $1 million at this time, barely considered a small rich man. In this case, he would be crazy to go out and risk his life for the Federation instead of enjoying a sinful life in a capitalist society. As for Potent Burn saying that Washington would bury his military force, Roan didn't care at all. When his status was higher in the future, he would most likely not need to do it himself. By then, he would have a bunch of lackeys, a bunch of agents, who would shoot wherever they pointed, which would be more refreshing than going out and wielding the knife himself. Of course, it was definitely not possible to reject him openly, so Roan repeatedly said that Verenus had been very kind to him, and that he would not leave without saying anything. Seeing this, Potent Burn could not persuade him anymore, but silently lamented that his luck was a bit bad, and he had not met a talent like Roan Greenwood earlier. After a brief chat, Potent Burn left the special investigation team, and Roan sat down on the chair in the office area again. Lassie put down her phone, looked up and asked, Roan, what did you talk about just now? Please call me Deputy Team Leader, thank you. Roan replied casually, while turning on the computer on the desk, and answered, the loss of the bank has come out, and it is said to be $10 billion. What? How could it be only this much? Hearing this, Mona and Lassie were both slightly stunned, and when Roan gave them a look, they immediately understood. It's a bank indeed. Mona muttered to herself and continued to type on her laptop. Lassie curled her lips and lowered her head to continue to fight with her phone. Touching his pocket, Luo An looked at the computer's boot screen and a gleam of light flashed in his eyes. Entering the URL and opening the website, Luo An logged into the familiar forum. Just as he was about to continue to argue with his familiar opponent, Mona suddenly showed him the laptop screen and asked, Luo An, our special investigation team's mailbox has received a lot of letters. What kind of letters? Self-recommendation letters and recommendation letters. Mona shrugged. Luo An successfully made a name for himself and their special investigation team after this bank robbery. Many agents now want to join this new investigation team. No hurry, we'll talk about it later. Luo An glanced at it casually and stopped paying attention. He handed the notice that Potent Burn had just handed to him to Mona and said calmly, "We'll find it ourselves later." Wow. Seeing the content of the notice, Mona was surprised, and Lassie was also a little shocked, but she took Mona's computer, opened a few letters, and took a look, and asked again, "I understand that you don't read the recommendation letters, but you don't read the self-recommendation letters either?" Lassie opened a few self-recommendation letters casually. The writers of the letters could all come up with a lot of golden and dazzling resumes. Each of them had their own pride, and none of them was an ordinary person. "We'll talk about it later. We'll talk about it later." Luo An still didn't raise his head and said the same sentence. Lassie and Mona were immediately furious when they saw this, and they pulled Luo An's chair over. Mona asked condescendingly, "Luo An, what do you think?" After all, this was to choose teammates who could be trusted in future operations, so they had to be cautious. Luo An, who was sitting on the chair, looked up at Mona and Lassie, who had their hands on their hips, smiled helplessly, and did not answer directly. Instead, he asked them a question. "If the choice was given to you, who would you choose as your teammate?" Lassie raised her hand very quickly, her face full of excitement. "Female. Pretty. Get lost." Luo An glared at her unhappily. Mona thought for a while and said, "You are responsible for the main field and leading the case. I'm responsible for checking the information online on the computer, and Lassie is responsible for gathering information offline. Because our special investigation team has a limited establishment, we no longer need other people in these three aspects. What we lack is an agent who understands political procedures and can write documents, and an agent who is good at martial arts and shooting and can take on the role of Riyadh before." "That's right." Luo An nodded and continued, "And these two people will most likely follow us to solve cases in the future, so the candidates must be chosen carefully. Instead of checking recommendation letters and self-recommendation letters one by one like in a beauty pageant, it is better for us to get in touch with them in person in the future process of solving the case, and find out their temperament and situation, so as to decide the specific candidates for these two positions. For Luo An, teammates can have some minor shortcomings, such as Lassie, but at critical moments, they must distinguish the importance of the important, and must not be pigs. Pig teammates are far more terrible than enemies." "Okay." Knowing Luo An's idea, Mona and Lassie nodded in unison. The plan of getting in touch with others first, and then deciding whether they can become teammates also perfectly considered their needs, so the two of them stopped entangled with Luo An, and immediately turned around and began to check the letters in the computer. Mona wanted to know what computer talents there were in the FBI Los Angeles branch, and Lassie found that there were many beauties from other departments, so she began to frantically record their contact information. Seeing Lassie frantically saving phone numbers on her phone made Luo An's teeth ache. After thinking for a while, he coughed and said, "Lassie, there is something I need you to do." "What is it?" Hearing that there was a task, Lassie immediately stopped what she was doing, put away her lecherous eyes, and turned to look at Luo An seriously. Luo An was very satisfied with this. This was the reason why he had never thought of excluding Lassie from the special investigation team. Once there was something serious, Lassie had always been very serious and never let down her chain. Pointing to the room next to him, Luo An said, "Do you see the team leader's office?" Lassie nodded. Luo An allocated a sum of money from the special investigation team's funds, handed it to her, and smiled. "There is some space inside. Go get some office supplies and fill it up." Lassie rolled her eyes after taking the funds handed over by Luo An. She thought there was something big going on. There is no woman who doesn't like spending money to buy things. Lassie was about to pull Mona to go with her, but Luo An quickly stretched out his hand to stop her and said, "Wait a minute, Lassie, you go by yourself. Mona has other things to do." Mona turned her head back with a puzzled look on her face. Lassie looked at Luo An, then at Mona, and after a few seconds of silence, she looked as if she had suddenly realized something. "I understand, Luo An, let's add an extra folding bed, right? Get out." Ha ha ha. Lassie dodged the kicks from Luo An and Mona, laughed and waved her hands, turned around and left the special investigation team. I will definitely prepare your office tomorrow morning. Luo An rolled his eyes, and Mona was also helpless. Then she turned to look at Luo An and asked, what do I need to do? A small thing. Luo An got up and walked to the door of the special investigation team's office area. He found that Lassie had left completely and there was no one else around, so he closed the door. Mona's pupils shrank when she saw this scene, and she quickly backed away with her chair. Luo An. No. This is an office. Chapter 289 Three Small Goals. Hearing Mona's words, Luo An didn't react at all for a moment. Seeing her stepping back repeatedly, he realized that Mona had misunderstood. You think too much. Luo An was speechless. It was all Lassie's fault. She had led Mona astray. Lassie in the distance. Then what do you want to do? Seeing that Luo An didn't have that idea, Mona breathed a sigh of relief. After all, this was the office area for handling cases. She wouldn't do something bad here. Luo An walked back slowly and smiled. I just want to learn some new knowledge from you. Mona stepped back again when she heard that. You still say you don't have bad ideas. Luo An looked up and stood there speechlessly. He planned to go back and teach Lassie a lesson so that she would tell less stories to Mona. After confirming that Luo An really had no bad intentions, Mona breathed a sigh of relief, sat back at her desk, and asked, what are you going to learn? Learn some knowledge about computer money laundering. Luo An sat next to Mona and said that this bank robbery case opened his eyes. He didn't expect that the computer world could actually commit crimes in this way. In a place like Hollywood where money never sleeps, the probability of them encountering financial crimes in the future is definitely very high. Now they learn some new knowledge. They don't expect to become computer experts. They just hope to find some clues when they encounter this type of crime in the future. Okay. Luo An's reasons are reasonable and well-founded. Mona didn't doubt anything. She turned on the computer and began to briefly introduce to Luo An how to launder money through computers. A few hours later, Mona introduced to Luo An how to set up programs to transfer various accounts in various accounts around the world so that banks cannot find out and track them. Because this aspect requires practical operation, Mona's hacker attribute instantly broke out, and she transferred a small amount of money in front of Luo An. Luo An. 6. After pouring a cup of coffee for Mona, Luo An studied some of the parts that he didn't understand for a while and practiced them briefly. After Mona found the mistakes and corrected them several times, Luo An took Mona away from the special investigation team. That night, Luo An used all his skills to successfully make Mona fall into a deep sleep in the dripping sheets. He returned to his room to clean up his body, drank a bottle of physical potion, changed into another set of clothes, opened the window and climbed out. According to the prior investigation, Luo An borrowed a laptop with very good hardware configuration, a USB flash drive with a lot of learning knowledge, and a bottle of gasoline in the car from a shop that handles stolen goods in the underground world of Los Angeles. Luo An took them and sneaked into the vicinity of another gang's territory silently. Taking out the USB flash drive, Luo An carefully disassembled it and then took out the small thing he had found under the hacker's feet from his pocket. It was a flash memory chip of a USB flash drive. After carefully installing the flash memory chip, Luo An opened his laptop, looked at the computer's boot interface, and took a deep breath. From the beginning of his time travel to now, Luo An has never been so nervous. The money that this group of bank robbers took from the bank is definitely more than 10 billion, but because the money is not clean, or the source is questionable, the bank refuses to reveal the real information. As the hacker who is mainly responsible for transferring money, his computer and USB flash drive are definitely closely related to the money in the bank. The only problem now is that Luo An doesn't know what is in the flash memory chip. Is it a computer bug made by the hacker to invade the bank server, or a program to transfer money from the bank account, or is it directly the bank account to which the money is transferred? Luo An has made up his mind. If the flash memory chip contains the first two, then he will burn the computer directly and put the flash memory chip away again. After learning more about computers in the future, he will try again. If it is a third party, then he will find a way to secretly investigate all the information of Jack from birth to death, and then find a way to analyze the account password and finally take the funds in the account. The computer was ready at this time. Luo An took a deep breath and slowly inserted the USB drive into the computer. Ding dong. The moment the USB drive was inserted, a slight sound came from the laptop, and a few seconds later, a black interface popped up on the screen. The black interface did not show the bank account to which the money was transferred, but a bunch of dazzling English letters and numbers. Could it be the program made by that hacker? Luo An frowned and silently pulled down the letters. If this was the case, he would probably need to continue learning computer knowledge in the future. But as Luo An continued to pull down the black interface, soon there were no longer complex letters and numbers, but a bunch of numbers and letters of different lengths that were very regular, with clear and identical intervals. This is. Luo An carefully looked at these numbers and letters and seriously recalled the knowledge that Mona taught him today. He was silent for a few seconds, and his eyes lit up instantly. These are the bank account numbers and passwords of TM. If you want to transfer the money in hundreds of accounts to hundreds or thousands of other accounts, it is impossible to type them one by one. You can only make a program in advance, and then the hackers behind can lightly press the keyboard and transfer the funds in hundreds of accounts at the same time. This is the knowledge that Mona taught Luo An this afternoon, and she demonstrated it to him personally. But what made Luo An a little confused was that he pulled down the black interface to the bottom and found that there were only a dozen accounts in it, far from the dozens he thought. But this is not important. In order to prevent the positioning program in the USB flash drive or the bank from discovering these accounts, Luo An immediately created several accounts in several countries in Africa and South America according to Mona's teachings, and then transferred the money from the accounts in the black interface to these accounts one by one. In the process of transferring money, the batch and multi-level transfer technology of money laundering methods was also used. A few minutes later, Luo An looked at the funds in several accounts totaling $300 million, and his mouth opened uncontrollably. Fouquet. 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 Luo An clenched his fists excitedly. This was the largest sum of money he had ever seen in his two lives. A small goal was achieved just like that. No, 3. Luo An now also saw the situation of the money. It was impossible for them to be the money that the robber leader Jack had robbed, because the group's goal was definitely not so small. Moreover, in the burning USB flash drive, the trace inspection department agent saw the remains of the flash memory chip. So this flash memory chip was most likely prepared by the hacker Asado Cherekdu Jack himself. I want to get more money from Jack, but Jack wants your life. Remember the account number and password, where the money is located. Unplug the USB flash drive, take out the flash memory chip, break the computer, pour gasoline on them, and then take out the lighter. Boom. The orange flame rose instantly, and the computer and the flash memory chip were burned into black fragments in an instant. The gangsters not far away noticed the movement here and immediately ran over with weapons in hand, but when they arrived here, all they had left was a pile of black debris. Half an hour later, Luo An quietly returned to the apartment they rented from the window. After taking a shower again, Luo An was about to walk into Mona's room when the phone on the table in the living room suddenly rang. After pressing the answer button, Lass's solemn voice came from the other end of the phone. Luo An, something happened here. Chapter 290, Case of 8 Teenagers' Corpses. A certain area in the west of Los Angeles. Roan arrived here in the sub of the Special Investigation Team and followed the instructions of Lassie on the phone to a more remote area. Although this area is relatively remote, it is brightly lit at this time, and the LAPD has already set up a cordon. Hello, FBI Special Investigation Team. After getting out of the car, Roan took out the FBI's golden badge to show his identity. The LAPD who stopped him was surprised to learn Roan's name, and hurriedly stretched out his hand to Roan, saying loudly, "Hello, Deputy Chief Greenwood." The voice of the LAPD patrolman was a bit loud, causing the LAPD not far away to turn their heads, and then everyone looked at Roan with a shocked or stunned expression on their faces. The bank robbery happened this morning. Roan Greenwood entered the bank alone and successfully killed 4 robbers without any injuries. The story has spread within the LAPD police station. They are all law enforcement departments. Every LAPD knows how difficult it is to do this. Putting aside the positions of different departments, most LAPD admire OWN very much. Moreover, there are some guys who are more confident in themselves in the LAPD police station, and they have submitted self-recommendation letters to the special investigation team. Hello. Roan stretched out his hand to shake hands with the LAPD who came up one by one, and his face was full of smiles. Suddenly, he had the illusion that he had become a star. Seeing that Roan was about to enter the scene, an LAPD hurriedly lifted the cordon for OWN. Thank you. Roan smiled and thanked the other party, and walked into the cordon, and then saw Lassie outside the cordon on the other side. Lassie was standing next to a big rock by the sea, and on the big rock sat a middle-aged white woman with cool clothes, a good figure and a beautiful face. But at this time, the white woman buried her head in Lassie's belly, trembling and sobbing softly. After looking at Lassie and nodding, Roan turned his eyes to the scene, and found that there were 4 tents here, with a fire and barbecue in the middle, which was obviously a camping site. But at this time, next to the fire in this camping site, 8 pieces of white cloth were extremely eye-catching, and they covered 8 bodies. Hello, I'm Sheriff Bill, Deputy Team Leader Greenwood. It's an honor to meet you. Hello, Mr. Sheriff. Reaching out his hand and shaking hands with the LAPD sheriff at the center of the scene again, Roan asked, "What's the situation at the scene?" 8 teenagers died while camping, and the death time did not exceed 4 hours. Sheriff Bill looked at the white cloth under his feet and sighed, pointing to Lassie and the white woman not far away, and said, "That is the sister of one of the girls, and also the person who reported the case." Okay. Roan bent down and casually lifted one of the white cloths to take a look. There was no external injury on the body, so he asked, "Have you found out the cause of death?" "It's probably drug abuse." Sheriff Bill's face was not very good. "According to the documents of these victims, we found that these children are not yet adults, and we don't know who sold drug abuse to them." Sheriff Bill has a daughter who is about the same age as these teenage victims. Recently, his daughter has been in a bad mood and has not spoken to him for a long time. Los Angeles is a world-famous flowery world with endless temptations. Sheriff Bill's hair is almost graying because of his daughter. Next to the corpse, when he heard that the cause of death of these victims might be drugs, Luo An's expression did not change. After arriving in Los Angeles, he found that, because of Hollywood and those stars, the drugs in Los Angeles cannot be simply described as rampant compared to New York. It is simply rampant that ordinary people cannot understand. Many bars or private parties use marijuana and other drugs as a gimmick. Although the LAPD police department has been cracking down on drug crimes, it is impossible to effectively crack down on drug crimes on a large scale because of those rich stars, as well as the politicians and other rich people behind the rich stars. This case is handed over to you. Sheriff Bill stood aside and answered a phone call. He briefly described a few words, walked over and looked at Luo An and apologized. "Another case happened in Hollywood, and we are really short of manpower." Because of the existence of Hollywood, Los Angeles ushered in unprecedented prosperity. But also because of Hollywood, the workload of LAPD police officers has always been ranked high among major cities in the federal territory. No problem. Luo An took out his cell phone and called the trace inspection department to ask them to send someone here as soon as possible. Then he pointed to the road in the distance and asked, "Is there a surveillance camera there?" "Sorry, no." Sheriff Bill shook his head, saying that this area was too remote and there were no surveillance cameras at all. Luo An was not disappointed. He just asked casually. After a brief discussion with Sheriff Bill, he turned and walked to the other end of the crime scene. "Hello, ma'am. I'm Deputy Team Leader Luo An Greenwood of the FBI Special Investigation Team." Walking to the big rock, Luo An explained his identity. "I'm also Lass's team leader." The middle-aged white woman raised her head, stretched out her hand and shook hands with Luo An. "Hello, Deputy Team Leader Greenwood. I know you. Just call me Vivian. I'm Lass's landlord." Luo An found out from a close distance that Vivian's beauty was far beyond his expectations, and she was no less beautiful than those female stars in Hollywood. Especially this year, Vivian is in her 30s, and her mature temperament is very attractive. Knowing Lassie's 2-hour performance, Luo An glanced at her calmly, secretly feeling that he had underestimated Lassie, but his expression remained unchanged, and he said in a firm voice, "I'm sorry for your sister's matter. Can I ask you a few questions?" "It's okay, go ahead." Vivian took out a piece of paper and wiped the tears from her face. Luo An did not ask the other party immediately, but turned his gaze to Lassie. Lassie immediately understood what Luo An meant when she saw this, and explained, "After I booked the tables and chairs in the office tonight, I cooked dinner with Vivian at home. After dinner, Vivian found that her sister Tina had not returned home yet, so she called her, but no one answered. Tina said that there was a party among classmates tonight, and she left her address in advance, so Vivian and I rushed here according to the address she left. Then we saw the situation on the scene." Luo An nodded and asked Vivian, "Does Tina have a history of eating flour?" "No, she doesn't." Vivian shook her head repeatedly. "My parents have always paid attention to Tina and disciplined her very well. She is a good child. She just drinks a little bit of wine occasionally on weekdays." Tina, as the younger sister, is a teenager this year and has not yet reached adulthood, while Vivian, as the older sister, is already in her 30s. Silently admiring the physique of the sister's parents, Luo An continued to ask, "Is there anything abnormal in Tina's recent behavior or attitude in daily life?" Vivian continued to shake her head. "Tina is still an adolescent girl, so she must have an abnormal temper, but this is all normal, nothing special." After asking a few more questions and still getting nothing, Roan thought for a while and finally asked, "Can you give us Tina's phone? There may be clues in it." "No problem." Vivian nodded repeatedly and repeatedly asked Roan to help find the murderer who killed her sister. Not long after, the detectives from the trace examination department arrived here. Roan comforted Vivian and turned to walk towards the scene. Lassie suddenly caught up at this time and whispered in Roan's ear, "Roan, I know something about Tina, this girl. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels." Chapter 291 Let the person who hurt you make money for you. Hearing Lassie say that she knew about Tina, Roan was slightly stunned, turned around and asked, "What's going on with you?" "Don't think wrongly, okay?" Lassie threw a pair of sanitary bowls to Roan. Although she was a lesbian, as a federal law enforcement officer, she would never break the law. The other party was still a minor, so she would not pay any attention to the other party. Roan believed that Lassie was not lying about this, so he asked, "What happened specifically?" "This Tina is not like what she seems to be. She is just an ordinary and simple girl." Lassie said that when she first moved into Vivian's apartment, she habitually placed some safety devices in her room, and then the next day she found that the things in her room had been moved. Although nothing was lost, Lassie was still alert in an instant and immediately began to investigate secretly, and then found that the person who sneaked into her room was the landlord's sister, Tina, who was still in high school. When the two met for the first time, Lassie did not find anything unusual about Tina, but a private investigation immediately gave Lassie a big surprise. On the surface, this Tina is just a high school student, but in fact, the money she has saved is almost beyond the imagination of her sister Vivian. Lassie took a deep breath. Her expression was very serious, but there was still a little shock in her eyes. Tina is a very smart girl. When she first came to Los Angeles to attend high school, she suffered some problems in school because she was unfamiliar with the place. Later, after her grades improved, she learned less about such things. Okay. Luo An opened his mouth and chose to believe Lassie on this point. After thinking about it carefully, he asked a question that he was more confused about, but according to Vivian, their parents control Tina very strictly. How did Tina do the things mentioned above? That was in middle school. Lassie glanced at Vivian sitting on a big rock in the distance and whispered, "Tina's parents are not in Los Angeles. It is only because Vivian is in Los Angeles that they allow Tina to come to Los Angeles to attend high school and hope that Vivian will take good care of her sister. But Vivian is a little actor working in Hollywood. When she is busy, she has no time to pay close attention to Tina. She can only supervise her sister by calling or other means. Tina is very smart, rarely reveals flaws when doing things, and her grades have always been good and have not declined, so Vivian has never discovered the other side of her good sister. 6. Luo An was silent for a few seconds, looking at the body of the beautiful girl carried away by the trace examination department in the distance, and was very emotional. School violence is a chronic disease in the Federal Society, so there are many cases of various bloody incidents, and countless students, teachers, and parents are killed and injured every year. But this is the first time that Luo An has seen Tina's behavior. Go back and comfort Vivian. Remember to go to work on time in the morning. Luo An patted Lass's shoulder, raised his hand and yawned. There were really a lot of things to do this night. Helping Mona fall into a deep sleep cost him a lot of time and energy. Going out to fix the computer and chips did not cost much energy, but it took him a lot of time. As a result, there is another large-scale murder case. Although Luo An's body will not feel tired with the support of physical potions cannot eliminate mental fatigue. No problem. Seeing Luo An yawning with a face full of distress, Lass's eyes flashed with a hint of understanding. She patted Luo An's shoulder and whispered, "I know some tricks that can quickly defeat the enemy without too much effort. Do you want them?" Lassie didn't think there was anything wrong with what she said to Mona. Anyway, she was the final beneficiary. Luo An, who had just killed 4 people during the day, subconsciously thought it was a killing skill, but Lass's skills were limited. He turned his head in confusion. Seeing the light in Lass's eyes, Luo An knew that she was talking about killing skills. With a cold snort, Luo An, who had a system in his mind, was full of confidence in his physical strength. He didn't need to learn anything from Lassie, a lesbian. Lassie thought that Luo An's cold snort was intended to reject her. Just as she was about to turn around and leave, Luo An suddenly whispered in her ear, "Compile it into a report later, and give it to me quietly." Selectively ignoring Lass's speechless face, Luo An strode away with a righteous face. "It's not that I don't have confidence in myself, but there is an old saying in the East across the Pacific Ocean, more skills are better than less." Luo An has always been a person who likes to learn new knowledge. The next day, outside the morgue of the FBI Los Angeles branch. "Hello, Deputy Team Leader Greenwood. My name is Paul. The forensic doctor here is a chubby, very fat, bald, and smiling middle-aged white man who looks to be in his 40s. Hello, Paul." The other party's smile is very contagious, and Luo An also grinned and smiled. "Just call me Luo An. Paul has been working here for 20 years. Although his rank is not high, the polite Luo An respects his predecessors. Then I will call you Deputy Team Leader Luo An." Forensic Dr. Paul smiled and handed Luo An a mask, saying that he had heard about Luo An's behavior in the bank robbery case and admired Luo An very much. He also said that, if he was 20 years younger, he would definitely send a letter of self-recommendation to the Special Investigation Team. Luo An took the mask, but did not wear it. He smiled and exchanged a few words with Paul, then turned the topic to business. "How is it? Have the autopsies of the 8 bodies last night been completed?" Seeing Luo An taking the mask, but not wearing it, Forensic Dr. Paul smiled even more brightly. He pushed open the door of the morgue and said as he walked in, "Several colleagues and I have finished the work, but we haven't written the autopsy report yet. Thank you for your hard work." Taking a look at the 8 bodies in the room, Luo An selectively ignored the peculiar smell in the room and asked, "What was the cause of their death?" "Drug overdose." Forensic Dr. Paul pulled over a chair and sat down, folding his arms across his chest. "We found fentanyl and carfentanil in the stomachs of these 8 victims. Deadly combination." Luo An was shocked. Carfentanil is usually used to anesthetize elephants. These young men weighed only a little over 100 pounds. How could they compare to elephants weighing several tons? Are there any other situations? Yes. Paul took Roan to the depths of the morgue, lifted the white cloth on one of the bodies, and said, "This girl's situation is a little more complicated than others." Roan looked down and found that the girl was Vivian's sister Tina. "What's complicated?" Paul took a piece of paper from the side and handed it to Roan. Roan glanced at the content on it, and his expression suddenly became a little complicated. 10 minutes later, Roan returned to the Special Investigation Team. Mona sat in a chair and drank coffee calmly, while Lassie was far away from Mona, writing something with her head down. Seeing Roan coming back, Lassie immediately closed the folder on the table. "How is it? Do you have any clues?" "Of course." Roan handed the paper in his hand to Lassie. Just as he was about to ask Mona about the information investigation of the 8 dead, the phone in his pocket suddenly rang. Tina's behavior in this case was not fabricated by the author, but something that really happened in South Carolina. It can only be said that the United States is indeed a leading country, and the version has always been at the forefront of the world. Chapter 292, The Eyes and the $300 Million. Special Investigation Team, Office Area. Taking out his cell phone, Roan found that the person who called him was the team leader Potent Burn, who said that he had something to ask him to go to the office. "Okay." Nodding and hanging up the phone, Roan asked Mona and Lassie to wait for a while, then turned and left the office area. Mona didn't care and turned to continue typing on the computer, but found that Lassie was looking at the report in her hand with a complicated expression. "What's wrong?" Lassie licked her lips and didn't answer, but handed the report to Mona. After taking the report, Mona found that the deceased named Tina had drug residues of fentanyl and carfentanil in her body, as well as drug residues that could cause coma. At the same time, Tina's 2 wrists and 2 ankles had bruises from being pinched hard, and her lower body was also violently violated. There was no white genetic material residue of the perpetrator in Tina's body, but dimethicone was detected. This ingredient was found in the other 4 male victims. Mona looked up at Lassie. She also learned about Tina's other side from Lassie this morning. The contents of the report clearly tell what Tina experienced last night. The 2 women in the office looked at each other and fell silent. On the other side, Luo An stood in the elevator with his hands in his pockets, silently guessing why Potent Burn asked him to go to the office this time. It was probably not the $300 million he got last night, otherwise the other party would not have asked him to go to the office, but would have brought a bunch of people to the door in person. How to deal with the $300 million? Luo An did not plan to transfer them into the federal territory immediately, but planned to continue to use the money laundering method in the future to transfer the money in batches and multiple levels. Luo An planned to do this process 3 more times. It is always better to be careful. Only by being cautious can you sail for a long time. After the 3 transfers, Luo An planned to register some accounts in tax havens such as the Cayman Islands and Panama, and deposit the money in batches. As for the legendary safest bank in the world, Swiss Bank, Luo An only planned to deposit a little money in it that matched his apparent worth. After all, according to the experience of the previous life, the neutral position of this so-called permanent neutral country is too scrudina, and Luo An does not want to expose himself because of their tricks. Arriving at the office, where the team leader Potent Burn is, Luo An knocked on the door and pushed the door open after getting permission. "Good morning, sir." "Good morning. Sit down." Potent Burn pointed to the chair in front of his desk, and Luo An sat down without any nonsense and asked directly, "I don't know what task the sir called me to come for." "It's not a task, but there are some situations that need to be explained to you." Potent Burn leaned back and crossed his legs, crossed his hands on his knees, looked at Luo An and said, "The Internal Revenue Service Criminal Investigation Division, ICI, has begun to participate in the investigation of the previous bank robbery." Luo An's expression did not change. He had guessed this a long time ago. There is an old saying in the Federation, only death and taxes are eternal. Although the major consortiums in the Federation have their own banks, these banks also need to pay taxes. The largest tax is the federal income tax, which is the bulk of the federal government's annual funding for various social undertakings. In this bank robbery, the bank refused to tell law enforcement how much money was stolen by the robbers. This is a violation of the federal tax law, and it is normal for the eyes to take action. However, Luo An was not in a hurry. If the eyes took action, they could only investigate how much money was stolen from the bank, and it would be impossible to get the money back. After all, the money has been in bank accounts in many countries around the world, and has been jumping around many times. Thinking of this, Luo An also crossed his legs. Potent Burn couldn't have called him here today just for this reason. As expected, Potent Burn paused for a few seconds and continued. There are two groups of people in this bank robbery, namely the robbers led by Jack, and the driver mercenaries who want to kill him and silence him. We have already found out Jack's identity. He is the former leader of a certain action team of a federal law enforcement department. The 6 robbers were all soldiers before he left that department. At this point, Potent Burn looked at Roan with surprise and regret again. The reason for surprise was that the information showed that the 6 guys were not ordinary soldiers. Each of them had sufficient battlefield experience, but Roan still killed 3 of them without suffering any injuries. The reason for regret was that Roan was not his subordinate, and he had no intention of switching to his own. Roan selectively ignored the look in Potent Burn's eyes and asked with a smile, "What about the group of mercenaries that the driver is in? Have their specific situation been found out?" Humph. Hearing this, Potent Burn snorted coldly, saying that the number 4 investigation team successfully found 2 of them last night, but failed to catch them alive. The robbers drove a total of 6 cars, one of which was killed by Roan, who captured a driver. The people in the remaining 4 cars died in the street gunfight that night, so only the people in one car managed to escape. There were 3 people in the car, 2 of whom died in the rough operation of the number 4 investigation team last night, and the whereabouts of the last person are still unknown. According to the information obtained by the number 4 investigation team, the last person was the temporary captain mentioned by the driver. But unfortunately, the number 4 investigation team only guessed the other party's identity among the mercenaries, but did not find any photos or other information clues. Wow, what a cautious guy. After listening to Potent Burn's description, Roan raised his eyebrows slightly, a little surprised at this captain, whose anti-reconnaissance capabilities and other means were obviously extraordinary. Then Roan laughed. The number 4 investigation team was indeed a very powerful investigation team, but it was not an ordinary difficulty to find someone who deliberately avoided them in Los Angeles, a big city with a population of more than 3 million. At this point, Potent Burn finally told the reason why he asked Roan to come to his office today. That is, he wanted to ask him if he had any clues related to the driver's group of mercenaries. Roan shook his head. He really didn't hide any clues before. After all, there was no great significance in doing so. After thinking for a while, Roan added, "I think we can focus on investigating the specific situation of Jack later. He may be related to this mercenary captain." Okay. Seeing Roan shaking his head, Potent Burn sighed. He did this as a last resort. In fact, he didn't think Roan deliberately concealed the clues. It was just a habit accumulated over many years. He would always feel uncomfortable if he didn't ask. By the way, you must pay more attention when you are active in Los Angeles in the future. At the end of the 2 people's chat, Potent Burn said seriously, "After all, you killed a member of that group of mercenaries. We can't rule out the possibility that the temporary captain attacked you." "Okay, thank you, sir." Roan grinned, indicating that he knew, and then turned and left the office. Pushing open the door of the special investigation team, Luo An was surprised to find Lassie and Mona arguing loudly about something. Chapter 293, Relationships that can be written into a book. In the office area of the special investigation team, Mona and Lassie immediately stopped arguing when Luo An opened the door and walked in. Mona and Lassie's loud argument scared Luo An, who originally thought that the two had an irreconcilable conflict. But seeing that the two stopped arguing and just looked a little embarrassed and not like what he imagined, Luo An was relieved and immediately asked, "What's going on with you?" Lassie and Mona looked at each other and were silent for a few seconds. Finally, Mona pointed to the computer in front of her and explained, "We are just arguing about the relationship between these 8 dead people." Luo An looked puzzled, and then Lassie handed him a piece of paper. On the white paper were the names of the 8 victims, and they were connected by lines, and the relationship between them was marked on them, such as friends, boyfriends, and girlfriends, intimacy, hatred, general, opposition, ambiguity, etc. Then Luo An was shocked to find that under the name of each of the 8 people, there were at least 5 lines connecting with other people. Tina had the most, and she had at least 2 lines connected to each of the other 7 people. Luo An was dizzy from seeing the complex interpersonal relationships, so he simply stopped checking and threw the paper aside, asking, "What exactly happened?" Mona tapped the computer keyboard a few times, displaying the identity information of the 8 dead on the computer screen, and explained, "The paper you gave us before wrote down what Tina had experienced before her death. But Tina is obviously a smart girl, so Lassie and I want to investigate what happened last night." To this end, Mona retrieved all the information chat records of the 8 teenagers, checked and investigated them one by one, and then Lassie and Mona drew the paper covered with lines just now. Lassie sat on the chair next to Mona, holding the paper in her left hand and pointing to the chat records in the computer with her right hand, saying, "On the surface, Edwin and Lanrusha are a couple. Klaus and Karen are a couple. Anthony has been pursuing Tina, and Melody and Ben are in an ambiguous relationship. But privately, Lanrusha and Ben, Anthony and Karen, Edwin, and Melody." Okay. Stop. The complex interpersonal relationships between the 8 people could fill a book, and Roan's head swelled and his eyes dizzy. He quickly raised his hand and shouted to stop the other party. Seeing the innocent eyes of Mona and Lassie, and the fact that the two of them easily figured out and could casually tell the relationship between the 8 dead, Roan was very moved. Maybe this is the difference between men and women. Taking a deep breath, Luo An concluded, "So, what you mean is that at the bonfire party last night, because of the effect of the contraband, all the conflicts and problems hidden between the girls and boys broke out and eventually led to their deaths, right?" Actually, Lassie was about to continue explaining, but Mona next to her immediately suppressed her, looked at the chat records in the computer, pondered for a few seconds and nodded. "There are some small details that are wrong, but overall there is no problem." Okay. Luo An was relieved when he heard this, and then he felt a little sorry when he looked at Tina's photo in the computer. Obviously, this Tina is a very smart girl. She held the other 3 girls firmly in her hands so that they dared not resist, and also deceived the 4 boys around so that they had no idea what their girlfriends were doing behind their backs. Unfortunately, Tina didn't expect to taste this kind of thing alone. The boys who took the drug suppressed their reason with desire, and the girls suppressed their fear with anger. Luo An shook his head again and again, not knowing how to evaluate Tina's short life. After a few seconds of silence, Luo An asked, "Who brought fentanyl and carfentanil? Have you found out?" "The person is dead. The truth has been revealed, and the reaction of the parents of the teenagers, after knowing the truth, is a matter for the future. The top priority now is to quickly find the guy who sold this unique drug to minors, to prevent more teenagers from dying. Especially for a terrifying unique drug like carfentanil, the potency of fentanyl is 100 times that of the analgesic morphine, while the potency of carfentanil is 100 times that of fentanyl. Only 0.02 grams can kill an adult weighing more than 100 kilograms. If this terrifying thing continues to be sold to teenagers in Los Angeles, who knows how many families will be broken and disappear in the future." "Of course I found it." Mona said the clue was in the chat records. After a few simple keystrokes, Mona pulled up a copy of Anthony's chat history, then pointed at the computer and explained. 40 minutes before the bonfire party started, he sent a message to a guy named Wild Dog asking him if he had the usual chewing gum. The other party said that the usual chewing gum was gone, and he now had some more powerful small candy balls. Luo An narrowed his eyes slightly. It seems that this Anthony has the habit of eating flour on weekdays. This Wild Dog is most likely the guy who sold him fentanyl. That's right. Mona adjusted the chat history and set the time to 18 hours before the bonfire party started. Pointing to a chat record, she said, "At this time, Anthony said that he had bought drugs that could make people fall asleep. He also told Edwin that he planned to drug Tina's wine while she was drinking, and he no longer had the patience to waste time with Tina. But there was no alcohol residue in Tina's stomach, which meant that she didn't drink." Luo An sat on the chair. Not drinking meant that Tina had been prepared for last night's party. But unfortunately, a girl still couldn't resist the brute force of 4 boys. Beauty and wisdom without the blessing of powerful force will eventually be destroyed by others. Lassie sat aside and cursed in a low voice. She was now in a headache. How should she tell Vivian about her sister later? Luo An continued to ask, "Who is that Wild Dog? Have you found out? Wild dog. His real name is Victor K. Thomagema, Peruvian, 25 years old this year, a second generation immigrant. Mona tapped on the keyboard with 10 fingers and soon called up a young man whose appearance showed that he was mixed race. Do you have a criminal record? 3 intentional injuries, 1 illegal possession of a gun, and 1 drug possession in a public place. 5 months ago, this guy just got out of prison. Another young and promising young man with ambition. Luo An was not surprised by this. Judging from the situation in the entire federation, except for the rich, a large number of second-generation immigrants will be influenced by the free atmosphere of the federation and embark on a smooth path in and out of prison. After finishing the coffee in the cup, Roan took Lassie into the equipment warehouse. Where does this guy live now? A street in East Los Angeles. Chapter 294, 360p 480p, Outlook 1080p, East Los Angeles. Lassie was driving the SUV on the highway, while Roan was sitting in the passenger seat, looking down at his gun. Why am I driving this time? Lassie asked as they turned the SUV around an intersection. Because I didn't sleep well last night. Roan yawned. He had experienced a lot last night. Okay. Lassie glanced at Roan, pondered for a few seconds, and whispered, I have finished writing the information you asked for, and it is now in the folder in the team leader's office. Lassie was always efficient. She went out to purchase with the funds Roan gave her last night, and the team leader's office was completely new this morning. The new desk and chair were already in place, and there was even a pot of green plants that Roan didn't know the name of. However, there was no new computer, so Roan planned to pick one of the 6 computers in the office area and bring it in. In addition, there was still a lot of empty space in the office, and Roan had planned to get a foldable sofa so that he could rest alone or together on weekdays. But Mona said that they would not stay in Los Angeles for too long, and buying a sofa would be a waste of money. Under her strong protest, Luo An had to give up this plan. However, Luo An made a note of this matter. There was a study room in the apartment they shared. He planned to buy Mona some special clothes suitable for the study room background during the holidays. Thank you. Hearing Lassie's words, Luo An gave her an appreciative look, then ignored Lassie's rolling eyes, turned his gaze to the car window, and silently opened the system page in his mind. In the previous bank robbery, Luo An drank a total of 2 bottles of potion, namely, physical strength potion and featherfall potion. After solving this case, the system gave Luo An an excellent evaluation, and the 4 treasure chests opened were Swiftness Potion X2, Danger Perception Potion X1, and Pain Relief Potion X1. At this time, Luo An's system warehouse page had Hemastasis Potion X5, Antidote Potion X3, Swiftness Potion X2, Strength Potion X2, Sensitivity Potion X2, Pain Relief Potion X4, Featherfall Potion X1, Physical Strength Potion X6, Sleep Potion X2, Aqualung Potion X2, and Weakness Potion X1. There was a lot of physical strength potion in the warehouse page because of the previous incident in which Luo An's Porsche exploded and he killed the enemy. The system also gave him an excellent evaluation the next day, but the 4 bottles of potions opened were all physical strength potion. Luo An thought that the system might have discovered that he had been interacting with Mona too often recently and that he needed more physical potions. After the bank robbery, the system prescribed the Danger Perception Potion, which Luo An had taken out and poured into his stomach as soon as it was prescribed, just like before. As Luo An expected, his emotional perception ability in his mind had improved again. If Luo An's perception of others' attitudes and emotions towards him were converted into resolution, it might not have been 360p at the beginning. After drinking this new bottle of Danger Perception Potion, although it did not reach 480p, 360p was more than enough. The progress seemed a bit slow, but Luo An was not in a hurry. As long as he continued to solve cases in the future, the appearance of Danger Perception Potion would definitely increase, and it would only be a matter of time before it was upgraded to 1080p or even 2K. He could wait. Luo An also made another discovery. when he first acquired the emotional perception ability. If he wanted to perceive others' emotions, the distance was limited to face-to-face communication between himself and others, and the distance between the two could not be too far. After drinking this new potion, Roan's distance was a little further, about 3 to 4 meters. That is to say, in the future, anyone who is hostile to me within 4 meters will not escape my eyes. Roan licked his lips with his eyes narrowed. He was a little curious now, wondering which lucky person would be the first to experience his ability. Lassie drove fast, and the two soon arrived at the community where wild dog Victor K. Thomas Gemore lived. He got out of the car and walked into the community with Lassie. Following Mona's instructions, he walked into one of the buildings and then met several LAPD who were handling the case. After showing their identities and exchanging a few simple greetings with the other party, Roan and Lassie were surprised to find that the main subject of the case handled by these LAPD was actually the wild dog Victor they were looking for. Is Victor dead? Lassie pushed open the door and walked into the room he rented and asked in surprise, how did he die? From the rough situation at the scene, he was suffocated with a pillow. The LAPD chief stretched out his hand and shook hands with Roan, explaining, the deceased has been in arrears of rent for a week. The landlord really didn't want to wait, so he brought people to his door 2 hours ago to ask for the rent. The landlord knocked on the door for a long time but no one answered, but the phone sounded from the room, so the landlord took his key to open the door. Then I saw Victor's body. Roan nodded, walked into the room, and continued with the chief's words. That's right. The LAPD chief followed Roan and said that his colleagues had briefly investigated the situation in the area. There was no surveillance in the building, and no witnesses were found to be wrong, and no suspects were found. But there were surveillance cameras at the 2 entrances and exits of the community. The LAPD has gone to investigate and may find something. No fingerprints were found at the scene except for the landlord's brother and the deceased himself, but the two landlords can testify to each other and the approximate time of the deceased's death as an alibi that the others can testify to. Where's the phone? Luo An briefly looked through the scene and asked, have you investigated the deceased's phone? The LAPD chief was about to answer when Lassie came over with a phone in an evidence bag and smiled. There is too little time. The LAPD are busy dealing with the scene. It takes time to investigate the phone. They plan to investigate it later. Seeing this, the LAPD chief shrugged his shoulders and spread his hands. There is no way. The LAPD police station has always been short of people. Each chief has at least 2 cases in his hands at the same time. It is normal to do this. Thank you for your hard work. After comforting him casually, Roan continued to ask, when he saw 2 LAPD officers busy in the bedroom, did you find any drugs in this room? We found some marijuana. What about other drugs? For example, fentanyl in tablet form or carfentanil? No, we didn't find the 2 things you mentioned. Seeing the LAPD chief shaking his head, Roan and Lassie looked at each other at the same time. The chat records between Anthony and Vidic last night showed that Vidic had just obtained fentanyl and carfentanil not long ago, and he still had a lot of them left. It was impossible for him to sell them out so quickly. The fact that these 2 drugs were not found in the room meant that they were either hidden somewhere else by Vidic, or they were taken away by the person who killed Vidic last night. After chatting with the LAPD chief for a while, Roan took over the murder case on behalf of the FBI Special Investigation Team, and then notified the agents of the Trace Examination Department to come here to replace the LAPD to handle the scene. That afternoon, Lassie went to the Trace Examination Department to get Vidic's autopsy report. Luo An was sitting in the office area with a cup of coffee, and Mona was sitting in front of her computer. She had opened Victor's mobile phone and found some very interesting chat records in it. Chapter 295 The Real Goal of the Mastermind. In the computer, Mona mainly retrieved 3 chat records. In the first chat record, the person chatting with Wild Dog Victor was Ben, one of the 8 dead. That is, the young man who had an ambiguous relationship with Melody and slept with Lanrusha. This chat record shows that the first person to know Victor was actually this Ben. The 2 met in the bar where Ben worked as a summer intern to earn pocket money. After the 2 got to know each other a little, Ben introduced Victor to Anthony, and Anthony quickly became familiar with Victor. From this chat record, Ben did not find anything unusual from beginning to end. Luo An and Mona, who are more experienced, saw at a glance that when the two chatted, it was always Victor who was guiding each other. Letting Ben introduce himself to Anthony was also the effect of Victor's subtle influence. After reading through the chat records, Mona concluded, in fact, the person Victor really wanted to get close to was Anthony. Yeah. Luo An did not comment, turned around and went to Lass's table to look for the family background information of the 8 deceased, and motioned Mona to continue with the second chat record. According to the time when the information was released, the second chat record was after Victor and Anthony had known each other for a while. The content inside was very brief. Mainly Victor sent a sentence to a disposable mobile phone. Anthony started eating candy. The disposable mobile phone replied, "Good, see you at the bar tonight." Mona knew what the other party was talking about when she saw the candy in the chat record. The current situation is very clear. The mastermind behind the scenes is targeting Anthony. The goal is most likely to make Anthony addicted to drugs little by little, and finally achieve his goal through Anthony, who is addicted to drugs. But the other party did not expect that Victor gave the other party a combination of fentanyl and carfentanil last night. The superposition of the two terrifying drugs directly sent Anthony and the other 7 young men and women away. It is also possible that the mastermind behind this is to use the drug to kill Anthony in order to avenge Anthony's parents. Hearing Mona's analysis, Luo An added casually, he successfully found the family background of the 8 deceased on Lass's table. He turned to the page for Anthony, which showed that his mother was an ordinary restaurant owner and his father worked for the Federal Transportation Security Administration. The Federal Transportation Security Administration, FTSA, is an agency under the Federal Department of Homeland Security, responsible for the safety of public transportation in the United States. The main responsibility of this department is to use various screening equipment and technologies to identify dangerous items in luggage, cargo and passengers, and prevent these items from being transported onto airplanes. For example, guns, ammunition, drugs, bombs, cans, poison gas and other dangerous goods. Before the establishment of this department, this work had always been done by each airport, which hired third-party security personnel. But the occurrence of the 911 incident severely slapped the faces of these third-party security companies, prompting the federal government to establish the Federal Transportation Security Administration (FTSA) to check federal citizens riding transportation vehicles at various major transportation routes across the country. Anthony's father is a member of the Federal Transportation Security Administration (FTSA) working at Los Angeles International Airport. And he was a small supervisor of ground work, named Nassif. Wow. Seeing the identity of Anthony's father Nassif, Mona sighed and suddenly realized, if Anthony is successfully controlled and used to threaten his father Nassif, it will be very easy for the mastermind behind the scenes to make a lot of money by transporting drugs on airplanes, or to hijack planes with bombs, to carry out terrorist incidents. That's right. Luo An nodded. The federal security check is very interesting. In order to respect human rights, everyone who wants to pass the security check can choose to be scanned by a machine or to be checked by the staff of the Federal Transportation Security Administration. The specific content of the work of the staff of the Federal Transportation Security Administration is very operational. As far as Luo An knows, sometimes the FBI will call that SA group in order to restrict certain people from leaving the federal country. Then this group of people will find contraband from unknown sources on the target person's body or luggage, and finally force the target person to stay in the federal country. On the other hand, if a person successfully bribes the staff of the Federal Transportation Security Administration, then this person can choose manual security check, then walk through it easily, and finally take the contraband and dangerous goods, and take the transportation leisurely. Luo An looked through the specific information of Nassif and found that his economic level was average, his financial situation was good, and his colleagues had good reviews. He also worked very hard. In the past few years, he used his rich experience to find more than a dozen guys who tried to board the plane with contraband or dangerous goods, and was promoted to a small supervisor. In addition to the situation that he wanted to use Anthony to control Nassif, it cannot be ruled out that this is an act of revenge. Luo An pointed the content of the paper to Mona, which showed that Nassif had found a guy carrying plastic explosives in his underwear more than a year ago. This kind of person wants to take revenge on Nassif, and the reason is too sufficient. Mona took the paper and nodded. I will investigate the situation of these people now. The sound of keyboards began to sound, and Lassie quickly walked in with a few tapes, pushing open the door of the special investigation team. The specific autopsy report has not come out yet, but I have asked about the results. Well done. Luo An praised the other party, then stood up and took the tapes from Lassie's chest and asked, what's going on? These are some surveillance videos found by the LAPD near the community where Victor died. Lassie dumped the remaining tapes on an unused desk with a clatter. She said that the surveillance cameras near that community were relatively old and the surveillance cameras still use the most traditional tape recorders. She said that, when she left before, she and a female LAPD patrol officer left their contact information with each other, and the other party promised her to send all the surveillance cameras later. Luo An's mouth twitched when he heard this. When did this happen? How come he didn't know? He had been working with Lassie all the time, and had never separated. How come he didn't see Lassie chatting with the female patrol officer? Seeing Luo An's astonished eyes, Lassie put her hands on her hips, and was very proud. In terms of force, Lassie admitted that 5 of her couldn't beat Luo An. But in terms of women, Lassie dared to say that 10 Luo Ans couldn't beat her. Bang. Seeing the undisguised pride and arrogance in Lassie's eyes, Roan, who was unhappy, picked up a folder and tapped her head lightly, then said with a righteous face, tell me about Victor's autopsy results. Humph. Rolling her eyes at Roan, Lassie was very unhappy with his personal revenge, but she didn't care and explained, the real cause of death is the same as the LAPD guessed. He was suffocated to death by others. The time of death was probably around 4:30 to 5 o'clock this morning. The forensic doctor detected some alcohol and food residues in Victor's body. Judging from their shape, the forensic doctor thinks it took less than an hour from the time Victor ate them to his death. Good. Roan was about to continue asking questions when Mona next to him suddenly pulled his arm, pointed at the computer and said, Roan, look here. Chapter 296 William Mars Gang and Discovery of Suspects. Special Investigation Team, Office Area. With his arm pulled, Luo An followed Mona's instructions and looked at the computer. On the computer interface, there was a young man wearing a TSA uniform, one of Nassif's men, now dead. Seeing the other party die in a street shooting, Luo An frowned slightly. What happened? Mona tapped the keyboard a few times to jump into another computer interface and explained. According to the internal data of the FBI, this guy helped the dealer to carry the unique products into the plane, but the Federal Transportation Security Administration found something wrong. This guy is also a talent. He discovered the suspicion of the administration and prepared to escape, but before he started any specific actions, he was killed by the dealer behind him. TSK. Lassie next to him came over and heard what Luo An and the others had just discovered. She smacked her lips and said, the person below is dead, so naturally they have to choose someone higher up as a protective umbrella. So, this case is actually the work of a dealer in Los Angeles. High probability. Luo An answered, and then patted Mona on the shoulder. Look through this case and see who the suspects are. Then cross-check it with the interpersonal relationships of Wild Dog Victor to see if there are any overlapping guys. Okay. Mona nodded and started typing on the computer keyboard. Luo An turned around and waved the tape in his hand to Lassie. Let's check these surveillances to see if there are any suspects or other clues related to Victor's death. No problem. Lassie copied a tape and started to work in front of her computer. Luo An sat in front of another computer and repeated the same steps with Lassie. While waiting, he asked, by the way, Lassie, have the forensic and trace examination departments found anything else? The trace examination department didn't find anything, but the forensic doctor has a guess. Lassie answered while checking the surveillance footage in the videotape. The forensic doctor said that the undigested food in Victor's stomach looks like a set meal for two. So Victor should have eaten with someone before his death, and the other person is most likely a woman. Luo An was silent. Although this clue was described in words, an indescribable smell still came to his face. Time passed by minute, and the three of them soon found some useful clues. First, Mona followed Roan's instructions and successfully found a suspect through cross-checking. This guy's called Ryan. He was a juvenile delinquent when he was 10 years old and has been to prison. Mona put a photo of a white youth on the computer and shook her finger and said, he is 28 years old this year and is one of the suspects in the case of killing Nassif's subordinates. He was previously imprisoned for armed assault. Ryan and Victor lived in the same cell and were cellmates. Ryan was successfully released from prison a year ago. According to the information of the Organized Crime Investigation section of the FBI Los Angeles branch, this guy joined a medium-sized gang called Wilmus in northern Los Angeles after he was released from prison. Roan took a look at Ryan's headshot. He was a guy with a rebellious look in his eyes. Then he asked, what is the main business of this gang? What is the connection between Wild Dog Victor and them? The William Mars gang has a wide range of businesses, including strip clubs, drug trafficking, gambling, and small-scale money laundering. According to the internal information of the Organized Crime Investigation Department, Victor has no connection with this gang on the surface and is not a member of this gang. But Ryan has been promoted to a small leader in this gang, and Victor has been in contact with him and has a good relationship with him. He was promoted to a small leader in less than a year. He is indeed a talent. Putting aside his position, the guy who can rise so quickly in the gang is not an ordinary person. Roan motioned Mona to print out the photo of the main leader of the William Mars gang and then asked Lassie, how is your side? I found a surveillance video of Victor and a woman kissing on the street. Lassie moved the chair and showed Roan the surveillance video behind her. The screen was playing a picture of Victor and a woman who was dressed coolly and looked mature, kissing on the corner of the street. The two kissed for a while, and it should be Victor's mobile phone that rang, so Victor stopped the action of his mouth and took the phone out of his pocket. Then Victor made an apologetic gesture to the woman, waved his hand to stop a taxi, to send the woman away, and finally walked towards the community where he rented, while answering the phone. Seeing the time in the video, Roan immediately asked Mona, can you find out whether this call is from Victor? Who is the other party? Mona immediately started to investigate on the computer and soon shook her head. Sorry, the other party is using a disposable phone. But I have sent a special email to that disposable phone. As long as the other party opens the email, I can immediately locate the other party. Well done. Roan praised Mona, moved his chair, and ran to his computer, showing the clues he found to Mona and Lassie. The content of the surveillance video in this tape is very simple. A taxi that can be seen everywhere in Los Angeles is parked opposite the community. A guy with a hood and an unclear face gets out of the taxi. After a while, he returns to the taxi and drives away. Mona and Lassie were a little confused after watching the surveillance video at first, but they soon discovered a problem. Time. Lassie pointed to the time that kept jumping in the lower right corner of the surveillance video and said, the time when this guy got off the car was less than 5 minutes from the time when Wild Dog Victor died, and the time when he left the community was less than 10 minutes from the time when Victor died. That's right. Luo An nodded. Victor died in the early morning. At this time, there were not many taxis in this not so rich area. He checked more than a dozen surveillance videos, and only this one showed a taxi. Moreover, the taxi driver covered himself tightly with a hood, and when he left here, his pockets were much bigger than before, which was really too suspicious. Mona took the mouse and zoomed in the video. She saw the license plate number of the taxi and started investigating immediately. She soon found out the driver's identity. Hogan Halley, 39 years old, has been in jail for eating flour and intentionally causing injury. He has been driving this taxi for 3 years. Good. Roan raised his hands and stretched his back, then stood up and said, Lassie, take a few SWAT members and invite this driver to be a guest of our special investigation team. Okay. Lassie smiled and turned to walk into the equipment warehouse. Mona, come with me to talk to Anthony's father, Nassif. Roan then picked up the photos of the main members of the William Mars gang that Mona had just printed from the table and said, let Nassif see if there are any guys he knows. Then we will see whether we will only arrest some members of this gang or catch the entire gang. That night, at 6:30, in a single-family apartment in a community in western Los Angeles. On the sofa in the apartment's living room, Anthony's mother was sobbing quietly. Although his father Nassif did not shed tears, his eyes were red and his face was full of sadness. Chapter 297 3 pieces of news that shocked Luo An. Seeing the golden FBI badges displayed by Ron and Mona, Nassif immediately welcomed them into the living room and cheered them up to sit down and even tried to pour water for them. No need to bother, thank you. Ron immediately stopped Nassif's action. We are very sorry about Anthony's matter and we hope you will accept my condolences. Seeing Nassif's face that was trying hard to suppress his grief, Ron sighed in his heart. In the photos Mona had previously retrieved, Nassif was still very energetic and his hair was all brown. But at this time, Joseph had a lot of white hair on his head, which could not be concealed at all. We really didn't expect that such a thing would happen to us. Hearing Ron's words, Anthony's mother immediately cried in a low voice, narrating her grief in her heart and Anthony's usual behavior. Ron and Mona listened quietly and keenly discovered that Anthony's mother did not know about Anthony's eating flour and Anthony's alluding to personal relationship on campus. The two looked at each other. Luo An saw that Anthony's mother's mental state was obviously not suitable for asking questions, so he turned his eyes to Nassif. Do you mind if I ask some questions? No problem. Nassif did not refuse Luo An's request because it was about his son. Although he was a little puzzled that the other party asked the two to chat alone, seeing the state of his wife, Nassif took Luo An into his study. The two sat down, and Nassif poured 2 cups of tea for Luo An and himself. Thank you. After drinking a sip of tea, Nassif's mental state improved a little. Luo An saw this and stopped talking nonsense. He directly handed the photos to the other party. Please identify these people and see if there are any you are familiar with or have met and talked with. If the mastermind behind the scenes is really a senior member of the William Mars gang, then they will definitely send someone to secretly investigate Nassif or send their men to contact him quietly. The photos that Luo An asked Mona to print are the main leaders of the William Mars gang, as well as the trusted subordinates and well-known members of these leaders. As long as Nassif can find someone who has contacted him or someone he has seen while secretly investigating Nassif, then Nassif can serve as a witness and Luo An can start to arrest the gang tomorrow. Of course, in order to prevent Nassif from making blind accusations in his eagerness to avenge his son, Luo An chose to let him see the photos first and then narrate the case. Moreover, these photos are mixed with a lot of photos of passers-by that Mona randomly found. Nassif took the photos handed over by Luo An, and he was a little confused, but he still looked through them seriously. Time passed by, and Nassif finally pointed to a woman in the photo and said, Deputy Team Leader Greenwood, I have seen this person. Luo An's heart moved, and he reached out to take the photo, and asked at the same time, Mr. Nassif, are you sure? 100% sure. Nassif nodded very affirmatively, saying that he had worked in the Federal Transportation Security Administration for more than 10 years and had to contact hundreds of people on airplanes every day. Although he could not say that he had a photographic memory of Western faces, he could basically recall them as long as he had seen them. Okay. Nassif's words did not surprise Ron, as he had expected this. But the photo that Nassif found made Ron's mouth tremble. Because the woman he identified was not the mistress of a leader in the William Mars gang, but the middle-aged woman who kissed Wild Dog Victor last night. Ron's eyebrows jumped, and he took back the photo and asked, when did you meet her? Just after a child under my command went down a path of no return and was killed. Nassif said that he was promoted to a small supervisor, and a young man was tempted by money, and began to provide assistance to the monopoly dealers, helping them transport monopoly, but was eventually killed by the monopoly dealers. Ron asked the young man's name, and confirmed that Nassif's description was the case that Mona had found before. After a few seconds of silence, Ron continued to ask, where did you meet this woman? A bar that I often go to after get off work. Nassif said that not long after the case happened, he went to the bar to drink and chat after get off work and saw the other person next to his car when he went home. That woman is beautiful, but she is not a good person. She said she wanted to negotiate a business deal with me and could make $30,000 a month. Nassif sneered and said, I have worked in the Federal Transportation Security Administration for so many years. Any business that can make a lot of money means one thing, that is, the other party wants to use our power to do something that violates federal law, so I rejected her without hesitation. As he spoke, Nassif's face suddenly became ugly and asked, Deputy Team Leader Greenwood, wasn't the death caused by an accidental drug overdose? I'm sorry, Mr. Nassif, based on a detailed investigation of this case, we found that this case is not actually an accidental drug overdose case as you said, but there is a mastermind behind the scenes, and the mastermind behind the scenes is targeting you. Roan briefly described to Nassif the wild dog Victor, his cellmate Ryan, the murder of Nassif's men, and the situation of the William Mars gang. The specific details were not described in detail, but the chain of the whole story was enough to explain the general situation behind it. Sitting in the chair and listening to Roan's narration, Nassif was first shocked by Anthony's interpersonal relationship with the other 7 people, then confused, then astonished, and finally his eyes were burning with anger. Bang. Fouquet. *%*. After Roan finished speaking, Nassif slammed the desk in front of him, and then his face flushed and he cursed. After a moment, Nassif looked at Roan with a pleading face. Deputy Team Leader Greenwood, I heard about your performance in the bank robbery case. Please, you must catch the murderer who framed my son. But your son is actually the murderer who caused the death of the other 7 teenagers. Roan licked his lips and didn't say this. It was up to these parents to do what they wanted afterwards. After leaving Nassif's house, Roan drove the sub back to the FBI Los Angeles branch building. Mona sat in the co-pilot and began to investigate the identity of the middle-aged woman. The sub didn't go far when Roan's cell phone suddenly rang. He pressed the answer button, and it was Lassie on the other side. How is it? Has the taxi driver been caught? He has been caught, but there is a small problem now. Lassie on the other end of the phone was a little speechless. She glanced at the agents in front of her and whispered, several agents from the FBI Los Angeles branch's organized crime investigation division have come and said that this driver is their undercover. Roan grinned when he heard this. Just as he was about to say something, Lassie handed the phone in his hand to a tall agent. Hello, Deputy Team Leader Greenwood. I'm Deputy Team Leader Frez of the Organized Crime Investigation Division. Hello. The two of them exchanged a few simple pleasantries, and then Deputy Team Leader Frez said a new piece of information. Ryan, whom you are investigating, is also our undercover. Roan's eyes twitched when he heard this, and before he could say anything, Mona on the co-pilot suddenly patted his arm with a strange look. Turning his head to look at the computer, Roan was shocked to find that the middle-aged white woman who had contact with Nassif and kissed Vidic last night was actually Ryan's mother. Roan was completely silent now. After a long silence, Luo An said to the phone, give me 5 minutes, I'll be at the headquarters right away. Without waiting for a response from the other end of the phone, Luo An hung up the phone, then stepped on the accelerator, and the sub rushed forward like an arrow. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 298, Ruthless, Wolf Destroys. FBI Los Angeles Headquarters Building, Parking Lot. Roan didn't take much time, and soon drove the sub back here. Bringing Mona back to the special investigation team, Lassie was chatting with several agents. Seeing Roan push the door open, the 1.9 meter tall white agent in the lead suddenly brightened his eyes and stood up and stretched out his hand to Roan. Hello, Deputy Chief Greenwood, I'm Frez from the Organized Crime Investigation Section. Hello, Deputy Chief Frez. Roan stretched out his hand and shook it with the other party, looking up at him. After coming to this world, Roan was the first time he met someone he needed to look up to. He felt that Frez was probably 2 meters tall. When Roan was looking at Frez, Frez was also looking at him. Frez had also heard the story of the previous bank robbery. As a veteran who had been on the battlefield, he admired Roan's deeds of killing 4 robbers alone. After a few simple greetings, Roan and Frez walked into the team leader's office together. The two sat down, and Roan stopped talking nonsense and asked directly, Deputy Team Leader Freeze, what's the matter with Ryan from the William Mars gang? He is an undercover in our department. Freeze crossed his hands on his legs, indicating that Ryan's recent imprisonment was their doing, and they had already negotiated the terms with Ryan before he was imprisoned. The other party's goal of imprisonment that time was to get close to the core members of the William Mars gang. Ryan did not disappoint their expectations and successfully established a good relationship with the core members of the William Mars gang. After being released from prison, Ryan joined the William Mars gang naturally. With Ryan's own efforts, the recommendation of the core members, and the help of the Organized Crime Investigation Department, he quickly climbed to the management level. The original plan of the Organized Crime Investigation Department was to help Ryan into the core leadership of the William Mars gang, find a way to obtain the core evidence of this gang, and finally the Organized Crime Investigation Department would annihilate it in one fell swoop. Sorry, I don't understand the questions. When Deputy Team Leader Freeze was talking, Luo An reached out his hand to interrupt him, frowning and asking, as far as I know, this kind of undercover situation is generally top secret. Why did you explain it to me in such detail? Also, most of the undercovers sent by the FBI are selected from agents within the FBI or law enforcement officers from other law enforcement departments. Why did you choose a guy who is more diligent in going to jail than going home to be an undercover this time? Hearing this question, Freeze paused, raised his eyebrows, and looked at Luo An for a few seconds, pondered for a few seconds, and replied, the reason why we chose Ryan is an experiment of our Organized Crime Investigation Department. We have a first-degree murder case related to Ryan with a very solid chain of evidence. Luo An's expression did not change, and he understood it in his heart. This is not the first time that the FBI has done this. Every year, they select some serious criminals, make deals with them, and let them do some gang undercover work and contact monopoly dealers. After all, this kind of work is very dangerous. If an FBI agent or other law enforcement personnel is discovered and killed by the enemy, it will not only mean the failure of the mission for the FBI, but also mean that they will have to pay a large sum of compensation. If a serious criminal is killed after his true identity is discovered, the FBI will have too many options in this matter. Of course, it is more risky to use these people to perform tasks for the FBI. After all, no one knows whether they will choose to run away and leave the Federation after leaving prison, or disobey the FBI and kill more innocent people. So, now that you are willing to tell me about Ryan's situation, there is a high probability that he has a problem, right? After Freeze finished speaking, Luo An took it up. He took a sip of the coffee on the table and frowned slightly. After drinking the tea from Nassif's house, Luo An suddenly found that the coffee didn't taste very good. The coffee can be changed, and I will go back to buy some tea. That's right. Freeze said in a deep voice. The reason we chose Ryan was that he was very filial to his mother. So we used his mother and Ryan's first-degree murder case to convince the other party. But recently, our agent who was responsible for contacting Ryan found that Ryan's emotions and thoughts were getting more and more wrong, and there were some problems with his activities. So, hearing Freeze openly say that they convinced the other party with Ryan's mother, Luo An's expression did not change, and he sneered twice in his heart. How the Organized Crime Investigation Department persuaded Ryan, Luo An was too lazy to care. But when it came to Ryan's mother, that is, the middle-aged woman who looked very beautiful, Luo An's eyes flashed with a gleam. Does Ryan know about the relationship between his mother and the wild dog Victor? Is there any plan of Ryan in it? It's okay if he doesn't know. If he knows, and there is really a plan, it means that Ryan is a ruthless person. No, he is a wolf destroyer. Shaking his head, putting the matter aside for the time being, Luo An continued to ask some questions about Ryan, and then walked into the interrogation room with Lassie. The taxi driver had not been interrogated yet. In the interrogation room, the taxi driver was a white man who looked to be in his 30s. Ron and Lassie sat down on the chairs opposite the taxi driver and asked, "We already know your identity, so we won't waste time talking to you. Tell us, why did you drive to this community this morning?" Taking the surveillance photo Ron handed him, the taxi driver waved his hands repeatedly. No, the person in the photo is not me. I have never been to that community. Lassie asked, "Isn't the taxi in the photo yours?" "The taxi is mine, but the person driving it is not me." Seeing the scene in the photo, the taxi driver breathed a sigh of relief and explained, "I have a good relationship with a guy from the William Mars gang. He sometimes asks me to borrow a car. In order to build a good relationship with him and make some pocket money, I often lend him a car. It was the same last night. I have an alibi." "Good." Roan made a few strokes on the notebook and continued to ask, "Who is this person?" "Cody Kian. Special Investigation Team, the front of the office area." Roan borrowed 2 whiteboards from Investigation Team number 4 and said he would return them after use. Investigation Team number 4. Cody Kian, 23 years old, no criminal record, apparently not a member of the William Mars gang, but actually one of Ryan's hidden confidants. After getting the name of the murder suspect from Roan, the Organized Crime Investigation Department quickly found the other party's information, always keeping a close eye on Ryan. Lassie, who was not used to the behavior of the Organized Crime Investigation Department, muttered in a low voice. Mona patted her arm calmly, then looked up at Frez and asked, "What is the driver's license number of this guy?" An agent under Frez told Mona the number, and Mona began to type on the keyboard. Roan thought for a while and added, "By the way, you should carefully check the chat records between this guy and Ryan, between Wild Dog Victor and Ryan, and between Ryan and his mother." "Okay." Mona raised her hand and gave Roan an okay gesture. At this moment, a technical agent under Frez suddenly said loudly, "Everyone, we know what Ryan is going to do." Chapter 299. The secret behind the case. The William Mars Bang Gang is a medium-sized gang located in northern Los Angeles. It is involved in all kinds of illegal and criminal activities that can make money. The organizational structure of this gang is relatively simple. There is a gang leader and 3 big bosses under him. Under the 3 big bosses, there are 4 to 5 small bosses. One of the big bosses is named Johnson, who is in charge of the white flower business of the William Mars Bang Gang. Ryan is a small boss under Johnson. In the case of an employee of NASF who worked at the Federal Transportation Security Administration and was killed for helping the gang transport drugs, the gangster behind the scenes was William Mars Bang, and it is likely that Johnson gave the order. After the death of this employee, Johnson's white flower business revenue decreased a lot. Freese's technical agent pointed to the information in the computer and explained, "As a small leader under Johnson, Ryan is the most motivated and capable guy. It is very likely that Ryan first proposed the method of bribing NASF, and his mother had contact with NASF is proof of this. After this method failed, it is also very likely that Ryan proposed the action of using a unique drug to lure NASF's son, thereby forcing NASF to commit the crime. Ryan's cellmate Victor is proof of this." Freeze, who was standing behind the technical agent, suddenly realized, and then gritted his teeth and said, "This is not the task we assigned to Ryan, and Ryan has never reported it to us. It seems that Ryan really intends to climb up in the William Mars gang and betray the FBI at the same time. The reason why Ryan did this may not be that he wants to climb up the William Mars gang." After Freese's voice fell, Roan, who was standing behind Mona, saw the information she found, pondered silently for a moment, and sneered, "This guy's probably planning to take some money and take his mother out of the Federation." "What?" Freese's expression froze. "What do you mean?" Seeing the confusion on his face, Roan glanced at Freese. He had heard that the Los Angeles LAPD's handling of cases was notoriously rough throughout the Federation and was often complained about. He didn't expect that the Los Angeles branch of the FBI's methods were not very good, just as rough as the LAPD. With his hands folded across his chest, Roan raised his chin towards Mona's computer and explained calmly, "Your Organized Crime Investigation Division has pushed Ryan too hard. He really wants to betray the FBI. There is a subtext in the chat records with his mother. But Ryan knows that you have the evidence against him. If he dares to betray the FBI may use the gang to get rid of him. So he plans to extort money from you and the gang and then run away with his mother." Based on Ryan's chat records with Vidic, his mother, Ryan's action records in the Organized Investigation Division, Ryan's current situation, and Ryan's behavior patterns in prison and in the gang. Roan quickly determined the other party's plan. Ryan's previous plan was similar to what Freeze's men guessed, that is, the route for the big boss Johnson to transport flour was cut off, and he offered suggestions and proposed a plan to bribe Nassif. But Ryan had investigated Nassif and knew that this guy had a tough attitude and would not agree to it. So after Nassif rejected his mother, facing the questioning of the boss Johnson, Ryan was not panicked at all and said the second plan he really prepared: use flour to control Anthony and finally force Nassif to commit. There are two advantages to doing this. First, the flour needs to be paid by the boss Johnson, and Ryan can intercept a small amount and exchange it for the most needed money before running away. The second is that this operation can make Johnson pay more attention to Ryan. In the future, when Anthony is really controlled and it is time to persuade Nassif, Ryan can propose to Johnson that he will take the money or take the flour on the plane to test whether Nassif really chooses to cooperate. It doesn't matter whether Nassif's attitude of cooperation is true or false. What matters is the money or flour. As long as he gets one of the two, Ryan can take his mother away from the Federation and live the rest of his life in other countries. Before that, he can also ask the FBI for a sum of money. There are many reasons. Luo An puts the other party in his position and can come up with a lot of reasons. The success rate of this plan is very high because the FBI did not imprison Ryan's mother, but only sent a few agents to simply monitor the other party. On the one hand, letting his mother contact Vidic was to test the attitude of the FBI, and on the other hand, it was possible that Vidic was the tool in Ryan's plan to take his mother away from the FBI's surveillance. But the problem also lies with Vidic. Vidic, who did not succeed in elementary school, only knew that the fentanyl and carfentanil Ryan gave him were strong and powerful, and had no idea that 0.02 grams of carfentanil could be fatal. In the end, he successfully killed Anthony and 7 other teenagers, and also sent himself to the gate of hell. During the analysis, Luo An kept taking out the chat records found by Mona in the files of the Organized Crime Investigation Department as evidence of his judgment. So after listening to the analysis, Mona and Lassie looked at Luo An with admiration. Several agents of the Organized Crime Investigation Department were dumbfounded, and Deputy Team Leader Frez also looked at Luo An with surprise. After a long silence, Freeze stretched out his hand and shook hands with Roan, and said with shining eyes, "I heard that Deputy Chief Greenwood's Special Investigation Team is still short of many agents. If you have time, you can go to our Organized Crime Investigation Department. We have many hardworking and promising young agents with various specialties." Freeze believed that he was too old to have much chance to join the Special Investigation Team, but his young agents still had a chance. As long as they joined the Special Investigation Team, with the ability of Roan Greenwood, the Deputy Chief, their future would definitely be very bright. When the other party was in a high position in the future, Freeze did not expect him to repay him, but having another thigh to lean on was also a good choice. "Okay, I will definitely go when I have time." Roan grinned and pulled his palm out of the other party's hand. The FBI's Organized Crime Investigation Department's case handling method does have a lot of problems, but most of the time it is orders from leaders like Freeze, and those grassroots agents can only obey orders. Moreover, there are few agents who are not smart enough to join the Organized Crime Investigation Division. If we compare their personal qualities, most of the agents in this department can almost stand in the first echelon of the quality of the entire FBI agents. After all, they sometimes need to go undercover, and they will not survive long without brains and skills. After making a note of this in his mind, Luo An looked at the time. It was already 9 o'clock in the evening, so he said in a deep voice, "Tomorrow morning, we..." Before Luo An finished speaking, Freeze interrupted him with a smile. "Deputy Team Leader Greenwood, the operation to capture Ryan will be handed over to our Organized Crime Investigation Division. We are 100% sure to catch him. HMM." Freeze's words made Lassie and Mona frown, and Luo An also looked up at each other expressionlessly. Freeze still had a smile on his face, and the atmosphere in the Special Investigation Team's office area instantly became quiet. Chapter 300. Want to pick peaches halfway? Joint action? The air in the Special Investigations Unit office area was extremely quiet. Mona, Lassie, and the detectives from the Organized Crime Investigation Division were all staring at Ronan Freeze in the center of the room. Freeze's words were very clear. The truth of the case had been revealed, and he wanted to grab the peach halfway. Grabbing the credit was one aspect, and simply thinking from another perspective, Roan judged that Freeze's real target should be Ryan. The other party was an undercover who had escaped the control of the Organized Crime Investigation Division. This kind of thing was a scandal anyway, and Freeze and his team naturally had to hold him tightly in their hands. Thinking of the rough methods used by the people in the Los Angeles branch, Roan felt that, if Ryan was locked up in the prison of the Organized Crime Investigation Division, he would probably commit suicide out of fear of crime soon. However, what did the scandal of the Organized Crime Investigation Division have to do with Roan's Special Investigations Unit? It wasn't Roan who caused the incident. After running around for so long, if the peach was picked by someone else, Roan felt that he would definitely not be able to sleep at night. So facing the look Freeze was giving him, Roan was too lazy to talk nonsense with him and said directly, "Tomorrow morning at 3:30, the Special Investigation Team will lead the SWAT team to formally launch the arrest operation against the William Mars gang. The main target is Ryan, an undercover agent from the Organized Crime Investigation Department, and Johnson, the leader of his gang. The time has been set, and the specific details of the task and other information will be reported to the team leader Pot and Burn later. If someone disturbs the William Mars gang before the specific action tomorrow, I will immediately report the matter to the senior leaders. Someone in our branch has close ties with the gang, which violates FBI regulations and federal laws." Roan's words were sonorous and powerful, his face was serious, and his eyes were fixed on Freeze, which was extremely oppressive. While Roan was speaking, Freeze wanted to interrupt many times, but was interrupted by Roan's momentum. He opened his mouth several times, but failed to speak successfully. At the last two paragraphs of the speech, Freeze's eyes were moved, and he said in a deep voice, "Deputy Team Leader Greenwood, you." As soon as Freeze started to speak, Roan stretched out his hand and shook hands with him. "Of course, in the process of investigating this case, the Organized Crime Investigation Department provided us with a lot of help. As a thank you, when we finish handling this case, you will have the opportunity to interrogate Ryan." Roan finished speaking, and did not let go, just looking at Freeze quietly. After a long silence, Freeze's face was tense, and he said in a deep voice, "William Mars is very important to the deputy director for this case, and he will support me." Roan replied, 8 teenagers died in this case, and the social impact is great. It is more important to the director, and he supports me very much." Hearing this, Freeze took a deep breath, stopped talking nonsense, pulled his hand out of Roan's hand, waved his hand, and led the agents of the Organized Crime Investigation Department to quickly leave the Special Investigation Team office area. At this point, there is no point in saying more. Freeze has a deeper understanding of the strength of Roan Greenwood, the deputy team leader. The agents behind Freeze looked at Roan with complicated eyes when they left here, including disgust, fear, admiration, etc. Mona breathed a sigh of relief. After Freeze and others left, Lassie put away the serious expression on her face and patted Roan's arm gently. "Well done. I thought you would make this case a joint investigation. This is our case, why should we do it together?" Roan laughed, and when Freeze was about to pick peaches, this possibility no longer existed. After a pause of a few seconds, Roan continued, "I will report this case to the team leader Pot and Burn. Lassie, you contact SWAT, and Mona, you must find out the location information of the headquarters and warehouse of the William Mars gang." "No problem. Leave it to me." Lassie and Mona immediately nodded and agreed. "Good." Roan took out his cell phone and prepared to call Pot and Burn, and said, "By the way, tonight is considered overtime. After we finish this case, we can take a simple day off. As the deputy head of the Special Investigation Team, Roan has this authority." "Great. I love you to death, Roan." Lassie cheered immediately after hearing this, and the feeling of sleepiness that she had originally felt disappeared immediately, and the whole person instantly became energetic. Mona also smiled, and then suddenly remembered something. Roan has been tossing more and more recently. If she fails to come to work the next day, will it be considered a work injury? Will there be any compensation? On the other side, Potent Burn pressed the answer button and heard Roan's narration of the details of the case. He immediately straightened up and became energetic. The next day, at about 3:20 in the morning, some villas and apartments in South Los Angeles, some bars, an abandoned factory area, and other places, some distance away from them, have several black SWAT action team transport vehicles parked. Lassie was in charge of the bar area, Roan was in charge of the factory area, and Mona was in charge of the villa apartment and other areas. As for An's mother, she was handed over to another SWAT team, and they have now arrived outside the house where An's mother lives. In a troop carrier, Roan checked to make sure that his equipment was in good condition, then looked up at Potent Burn, the team leader sitting opposite him, with a helpless expression on his face. After listening to Roan's description of the case, Potent Burn immediately said that he would also participate in this operation, and then hung up the phone without giving Roan a chance to respond. This made Roan, who was holding the phone, feel messy in the wind. Instead of sitting in the center to monitor the progress of the operation and prepare for a press conference, a team leader went to the front line in person, and it seemed that he was going to go on the field to shoot a few shots. After a long silence, Roan asked, "Sir, after the operation is over, won't we hold a press conference? I have notified the headquarters to prepare." Potent Burn, who understood Roan's subtext, laughed. This kind of thing of going to the front line in person was not the first time he did it. He had done it many times since he was transferred to Los Angeles. Potent Burn, who had been accompanied by gunfire for many years in the first half of his life, liked the tense and exciting atmosphere of the front line. And when holding a press conference, Potent Burn also liked to wear a frontline combat uniform and appear directly in front of reporters to answer their questions. Okay. Roan did not comment on Potent Burn's habit. Anyway, he did not seize his frontline command, and he did not intend to rush to the front. Roan stopped talking nonsense, raised his hand to check the time, and pressed the communicator. "Mona, report the situation. Everything is normal in all areas." "Good." Roan continued loudly. "The time is now 3:28. In 2 minutes, we will carry out unified operations." "Understood." Lassie and the SWAT team leaders and the communicator agreed loudly. Calm and composed, careful thinking, and thorough planning. Potent Burn looked at Roan with admiration. 2 minutes passed in the blink of an eye and soon came to an end. The next second, Roan shouted, "Action begins." Boom. As soon as the voice fell, the door of the troop carrier was immediately opened from the inside, and the fully armed SWAT team members quickly rushed towards the target. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.